2024. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. On February 7, 2024, proper notice was sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger and filed with the clerk at the Township of Bridgewater and posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Please be aware of the planning board policy for public hearings. No new applications will be heard after 9:30 p.m. and no new testimony will be taken after 10 p.m. Hearing assistance is available upon request. Accommodation will be made for individuals with a disability pursuant to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, provided the individual with the disability provides 48 hours advance notice to the Planning Department Secretary before the public meeting. However, if the individual should require special equipment or services such as a CART transcriber, 7 days advance notice, excluding weekends and holidays, may be necessary. Could everyone please rise to salute the flag?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Probst, could I have a roll call, please? Here.
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 Here. Yes. Yes.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Probst. Okay, to begin the evening, if there are any members of the public that wish to address the board on any land use matter that's not on tonight's agenda, please feel free to come forward at this time. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on. We do have a few board minutes for adoption this evening, carried over from last time. The first set is from May 21st, 2024. With the changes made last time, are there any further changes to the record? Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 21st, 2024?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Councilman Kirsch, Ms. Sikora. Could I have a roll call, please? Yes.
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 You were here.
You're present.
Yes.
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 Okay, moving along, we do have a set of minutes here from August 13th, 2024. Once again, if there are no further changes for the record, could I have a motion to approve the minutes for August 13th, 2024?
I'll move it.
That's Mr. Pappas. A second, please.
I'll second.
That's Mr. Banga. Could I have a roll call, please? Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Moving along to our resolutions section, the resolution for Gerardo Leonard is pending at this time. We do have a resolution for Kumar Realty LLC. Are there any comments or changes to the record? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adopt the resolution for Kumar Realty LLC.
No motion. No motion.
That's Ms. Chartowitz.
Second.
That's Ms. Sikora. Could I have a roll call, please? Yes.
Yes.
No. Yes.
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 The next resolution is for the area in need of redevelopment, also known as the Ethicon Building. And this was decided October 1st and adopted today, October 15th. Could I have a motion, or are there any changes or comments to the record? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adopt this resolution.
I'll make the motion to adopt.
It's Councilman Kirsch. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
That's Mr. Pappas. Could I have a roll call, please? Yes.
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 Thank you, Ms. Probst. Okay, moving along. This evening, we do have a public hearing for a preliminary investigation of an area in need of redevelopment. That's Block 221, lots 1.02, 1.03, 1.04, 2.0, and 2.01, also known as 1200 Route 22. Good evening.
Good to see you again.
Mike, we should probably swear you in since you're testifying.
Sure.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give in connection with this hearing will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you just state your name for the record, please?
Michael F. Sullivan. Good evening, Planning Board. Michael Sullivan, for the record. I'm a principal with Clark, Caton, Hinson, Trenton, New Jersey. I'm a principal with the firm, and we're also the redevelopment planner for the Township of Bridgewater. My associate, Tristan Harrison, is here, who worked with me on the investigation and will be helping me with the slides that will accompany my discussion tonight. Okay. Purpose of the hearing tonight is for the planning board to consider whether the study area, which is the Graymark office building, also known as 1200 Route 22, it's 1200 Route 22 East, should be designated as a redevelopment. The public hearing is required pursuant to the New Jersey Redevelopment and Housing Law, and this process was initiated by the Township Council, who by resolution dated August 15th, 2024, directed the planning board to study this area as an area in need of redevelopment. The basis for such a determination is contained within the redevelopment and housing law, and there are a series of criteria that you would compare the site characteristics to, and if it meets any of those characteristics, it would satisfy the criteria. Redevelopment area can include not just areas that meet the criteria, but also areas that are within the study area that may be necessary for the effective redevelopment of the area. In summary, the criteria for redevelopment revolves around building the properties that may be unsafe or dilapidated or underutilized or have obsolescent or unproductive conditions. The preliminary investigation report that you have and that has been on file is a summary of the information evidence that we've observed with respect to the site and evaluating it for as an area in need of redevelopment. And that report is dated September 2024. So tonight I'm going to provide a summary of our findings, go through some slides so that some of the images we can highlight the conditions we've seen out there, and then you can ask me any questions, and I'll answer any questions from the public related to the study or any of the information. Next slide. So the first slide is an image from Route 22. You can see the existing office building, and it's located really the central part of the township, but heading out towards the east. Put the tax map up, please. Thanks. The total acreage of the study area is about 28 acres. It's composed of 5 lots. Block 221, lots 102, 1.02, 1.03, 1.04, 2, and 2.01. They are all owned by the same owner, 1200 Route 22 land investors. Based on the tax assessment data, only about 7 acres of the site is identified as commercial use. But the reality is that some of the improvements for the commercial use, which is an existing office building, extend onto some of the other lots. But the remaining is indicated as vacant pursuant to the tax data. The next slide has the, nope, back, there you go. It's an aerial, it's a, I believe that's a 2024, March 2024 aerial of the subject property and the study area. On lot 1.03 is the Graymark office building, and this is a 110,000 square foot roughly office building built in the 80s with a typical masonry slab look with ribbon windows. It's occupied by medical offices at this time, and it's got approximately 376 parking spaces associated with it. Lot 1.02, which is indicated on the tax rolls as vacant, actually contains some driveways, some stormwater management facilities that are associated with the existing building, and previous efforts at development there. This includes a stormwater detention basin and some stormwater conveyance elements as well. And that is a shared driveway that comes in. It splits the lots in certain places. Lot 1.04 is contains a paved parking lot with about 58 spaces that are connected to the existing office development on 1.03 through the circulation and driveway improvements. And it's the site of a previously failed development attempt in the early 2000s. Lots 2 and 2.01 are smaller lots, and they are along Woodside Lane, and those are small lots that are undeveloped and they're vegetated. So the existing land use context for the area. The site itself is commercial, but this is based on tax data. So you see up in the upper left, adjacent to Route 22, it's indicated as commercial where the existing office building is located, but the remainder of the site is the gray color. That's vacant according to the tax rolls. The pink that you see, looks pink here, on the aerial represents commercial uses. The bright pink is the Eagles to the south, and then the public is the right-of-way. The yellow are the residential areas around there. So it's surrounded by some commercial uses, corporate uses. It also has multifamily and single-family residential, as well as the Eagles adjacent to it. Eagles Lodge. And the zoning is pretty much reflective of that. This is in the M1B, the Limited Manufacturing Small Lot District, which extends to the west from here, and then around it to the bottom is the residential 20, and then along Woodside Lane is the R10 zone. Permitted uses in the Limited Manufacturing Small Lot zone include business uses, manufacturing, research labs, medical offices, et cetera. Environmentally, there are some environmental constraints on the site. On the eastern side of the site is what's known as the Cuckles Brook, which flows from north to south, and it has wetlands associated with it on lot 1.02. It's a non-trout category C2 classification. It's got intermediate value wetlands, which would require 50-foot transition areas. It's got a floodway and 100-year floodplain on it, and portions of lot 1.02 are within those floodways and floodplains. A 2023 survey by Control Point Associates, which we have, indicates that approximately 8.8 acres, or 31.8% of the study area, is located within those environmentally constrained areas along the eastern boundary. And approximately 11 acres is vacant and unconstrained by wetlands or flood hazard areas. The site has a long history of development attempts, let's say, and I'm going to go through them so that we can understand it, and yet it remains vacant and relatively unimproved to this day. In 1981, there was a site plan and subdivision approval for 3 office buildings. It was a total of 3 office buildings for 336,000 square feet and 1,220 parking spaces, and that was approved. We don't have the plans for that. The archives just don't have them, but we do have resolutions and information about that. And it was partially constructed. Building 1 was started. This is the building we see there now, and the on-stream stormwater detention basin and 377 parking spaces.
In 1986 and 1987, there was an amended plan approval, which was partially approved, and Building 1 was completed around that time. In 2000, there was an application for an amended site plan and subdivision, and this is to modify the existing plan to add parking spaces so that there could be more parking spaces used by the Phase 1, and it changes the layout for Phases 2 and 3, but no changes to the approved floor area or uses were proposed, and that was approved, and that resulted in the additional 58 parking spaces that were added to the existing office building. In 2005, there was an application, use variance site plan and subdivision, so not a permitted use. It was at the Board of Adjustment, and it was to create 2 4-story hotels. That was denied. In 2008, there was another application, a use variance, and this variance allowed for a change in the tenant within the existing building, and that was approved. There was no changes to the site related to that. In 2014, there was another use variance and site plan and subdivision approval for 2 3-story hotels on this property. It was denied and obviously not constructed. And most recently, there is a current application pending on this, a 2023 application filed for use variance, site plan, and subdivision for a warehouse with a floor area of 179,973 square feet, 35 loading spaces, and 505 parking spaces, including bank parking and used stormwater facilities. That has been held. It is not progressed, and we are going through this process, and depending on this process, we'll see where that goes. Suffice it to say, there have been numerous attempts to develop this site since 1981, and despite the fact that there was a 3-office complex down here, only 1 building has been built. But as you'll see, as we describe these, what's out there, although the tax official classifies these as vacant, the property is far from vacant where there has been no new development. And I'm going to go through that. Next. This is the 2001 approved site plan approval, which indicates phases 2 and 3 for this site. This is the phase 1. This is a 1995 aerial, which shows the phase 1 office building. You can see that. This is an infrared aerial, so the lawns look red. The trees actually look green. The parking lots are gray, and the building is white in the middle, but you can see that largely undeveloped in the rear, and all the development is really up by Route 22, where the existing office building is. It does appear to be some clearing in the woods at that point. This is in 2001. And you can see that there's some clearing of vegetation and for stormwater in order to start moving forward with the 2001 improvements for phase 2 of the plan. In 2004, the developer made some real moves in order to develop this site and to build phase 2 and phase 3 of this site. And what you're seeing in this aerial photograph is you're seeing that the vegetation has been cleared, the woods has been cleared. You can see that to the south of the building, to the bottom of the page, is a rectangular area of red soil, and that is where the building pad was supposed to be. It's cleared. And then around that, wrapping around it is a dark gray area. That's an area that was prepped with stone base for a parking area. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with building parking lots, but you have to grade it, then you put in stone base, and then the asphalt's on top. So that's the stone area. So there was a significant move in order to try to build that second phase. What's next? So here we are in 2015. And you can see that nothing's progressed, really. They're storing steel beams out on the site, which is, I don't know where they were for, whether they were for this site or whether they were from another site, but they were stored and they were shown on the aerial. But you can see that red soil area is still there, and you can still make out where that prep was for the parking lot. And that's again, the 2001 site plan. So it's really mirrors, that phase one mirrors what you can see out there in the field. What's next? There we go. We've diagrammed some of the existing improvements out there so that if you couldn't see them with the aerial photographs, you could see them here. So in orange, we're showing the shared driveway and the new part, and that leads to the 58 parking spaces that were the subject of the amended approval on this. And you can see that there are some stormwater management elements there highlighted in red, and there was a spillway that was modified in that concrete channel on the right side, and that's in blue. And as we move south of that area, this highlights the area, the yellow indicates where the building clearing was, and it still remains that way, although obscured with vegetation. And also the red area, the pink area, shows where there's that stone bedding was put in, the subbase was put in for the parking area. The red lines highlight areas of stormwater infrastructure, pipes and inlets that were installed and that we've actually verified through a survey and on the site. So I want to give you, I've talked about this in the abstract, now let's go through some of the images from the site. This is the entrance drive that comes in, and this is really a shared driveway with lot 1.03 and 1.02. This is an area, this is the gravel area where the parking lot was supposed to be built, and you can see that it's starting to get successional vegetation in there, but if you look closely, there are it's gravel, right? So this is impervious surface that's out there. Next. This is one of the inlets that we found. You can see that it's been eroded down below the base, the box, the concrete box where the inlet grate sits on, and it sits above the grade, so there's no water going into that. It's not functioning. And this is another one. This was actually filled with silt and sediment and rocks, so that's detached. This is just stormwater pipes and elements that are left out there, have not been installed. This is the existing, there's a head wall there that goes into a water quality swale that was built to try to clean the water before it got to the brook. The original application didn't have that. This was a later addition. And this is a part of the basin that's in line with the stream, which is an unusual way of doing basins. They don't let you do that anymore in terms of the DEP's permissions. Next. That's the concrete spillway. At one point, you can see there's a little element in the middle that was added to help control flooding here. There's been flood issues over time here. In one of the hearings, I believe it was a 2015 hearing, there were substantial comments on the record with residents and neighbors who were very concerned about flooding and the characteristics of the stream there, and we're trying to ensure that no additional flow or flooding was caused by any new development. Next. That shows this gravel. There's like a riprap area within the stream corridor there at the brook. This is more, you can see that the gravel, even though it's there, you'll get some successional vegetation through that, but it's still out there. That shows that's looking back towards the 58 parking spaces that are associated with the office building, and it goes from asphalt, and then it starts to crumble. The asphalt crumbles, and it turns into gravel. So it's really degrading out there. It's another stormwater, I believe that's a stormwater manhole. It might be a sanitary manhole, but it's well above grade, and it's just sitting out there. There's more pavement degradation. Go ahead. This is you can see, some people call these cattails. You see the little brown bottle brush looking flowers that are on top, Typholatifolia. That is an obligate wetland species. You only find that in wetlands. This is in an area where there's supposed to be a parking lot. So there's ponding. We're seeing ponding out there, which is essentially could be creating new freshwater wetlands on site. And that's just a close-up of some of the broken up concrete and existing gravel. And then this is looking back from the area of the building pad that was cleared with the soil there, and you can see the office building in the background. And as what we witness out there is that, yeah, it's exposed gravel. It's also starting to create gullies and channels and things like that, and runoff of that soil. This is the edge of that existing 558 car parking lot. Shows that, you know, you've got a parking lot that's unfinished. You can see that there's basically stacked parking here. There's two rows for parking, but on this side, there's no aisle to get to it, and there's no curbing there, so it just disappears into the unfinished building area. And then we're back to this study area. So I wanted to give you that tour of the site, so well, as I talk about these things, we're not just talking about them in the abstract. What we found out there was that there's significant evidence of dilapidation and obsolescence. First of all, the existing parking that's building and parking area were part of a 1981 approval. The building you see out there was completed around 1987. The remaining two buildings were not, but construction moved forward. There are partial improvements out there related to this. The grading installation of the soil separator fabric and the compacted gravel subbase, rough grading and clearing of the building pad, and the installation of numerous stormwater management elements, pipes, inlets, and basins. At some point after this started, installation and construction ceased. So we assume that that was around 1987, 1988 or so. But the improvements that are out there are related to that 1980 or 2001 approval. They are not relevant to any approvals today, so they are obsolescent on their face. Additionally, they were constructed and designed prior to the current stormwater management rules that NJDP has and that have been adopted by the township. The stormwater management elements, the inlets, and I was trying to explain this a little bit, they were constructed, but they're not connected. They don't have paved areas that are connected to the grate elevation. So there's no stormwater management going on there, even though all this impervious surface was put out there. They're not functioning as they were designed to. And to function correctly, the entire plan would have had to have been built. It could not exist with a partial build like that. Beyond the obsolescence, there's a lot of dilapidation out there. We saw that the inlets themselves are starting to wash out. They're filled with soil, and the erosion looks like it's settling some of these inlet structures and pipes, and that they are not functioning. The water quality swale that was constructed does not appear to be maintained in any way, and it's not clear that that is functioning the way it was intended. As I showed you, the existing pavement that's out there that is common to the existing office building and the future phases is dilapidated. It's eroding. We can see that it's continuing to erode at the edges. In many cases, there's no curbs. Curbing serves two functions: provide a stable edge so the pavement holds together, and also to help direct stormwater. Where they do not have curbing on these unfinished areas of the driveway and on the parking areas, the water runs off, it is eroding the pavement, and it is eroding the soil. There's cracking, and you can see that there are weeds growing up and vegetation growing up in some of the paved areas. I talked about the ponding. We see the obligate wetland species in an area right off the parking lot, which is basically demonstrates persistent poor drainage related to these improvements, and so we're starting to see wetlands forming where they shouldn't be forming. We talked a little bit about the erosion within the building pad site. That's just where we observed it. There may be more areas of erosion out there, but we can clearly see where channels are starting to form in that area of soil. It's not stabilized. If this were an approved and constructed plan, there would have been compliance with the Soil Conservation District with respect to stabilization of any soil areas to prevent erosion and sedimentation off-site. So all of those things that we've observed out there are detrimental to the public welfare. The unmanaged stormwater runoff has the ability or the potential to increase runoff. We've got impervious surfaces out there that are not being managed from a stormwater standpoint. The portions of the site that were constructed, that building pad where the soil is exposed, is 1.5 acres. The parking area, the area of the gravel that was put in as the base, is 3.1 acres. That's 4 acres of essentially unmanaged impervious cover that is not getting to inlets. And so there's an increase in runoff. Additionally, that runoff could be carrying sediment. We've got an area that is not managed from a standpoint of cover, vegetative cover and stable vegetative cover. So not only could there be additional runoff, but that runoff will contain additional sediment. That sediment affects water quality. It can ultimately affect the flow of water within a stream channel because it starts to clog it up with more sediment in there. And that is a threat to health, safety, and welfare. With that, it's clear to me that the elements that are out there, the existing constructed, partially constructed elements of this site, will require some expense to remove them should this site be developed again. And it would also provide an opportunity to bring the site into the current world of stormwater management, should this be designated as an area in need of redevelopment, and the tools available by the redevelopment statute, with the redevelopment statute, be utilized here to facilitate cleanup of the site and replanning of the site in a way that would alleviate the detriments related to the existing improvements that are out there and the lack of stormwater management that is out there. Another detriment to this site is the fact that these improvements may be standing in the way of redevelopment of the property or development of the property. Tax assessment data indicates that the existing value of lot 1.03, which is where the existing building is located, is valued at like $10.5 million, with $4 million in the land and roughly $6.5 million in the improvements. The remaining lots are combined for a total of $4.5 million and zero in improvements. So the total assessed value of the study area is $15 million. Had the original 3 phases been completed, the assessed value is estimated to be roughly $31 million. So we're at roughly half of that right now. And that's a big hit to the tax rolls. So there is a negative impact tax assessment by not getting rid of these improvements, bringing the site into compliance with stormwater management regulations, and getting this property back into paying its fair share of taxes. And also, I will say that this is an open site. We were able to walk around there with no check-in with anybody. We could walk out there. We saw evidence of people who have been out there, and it's an attractive nuisance. And if I were out there and I didn't know what I was doing, I could easily have fallen into an inlet, tripped over something like that. So there is a safety issue with this. It's not fenced off, and it has not been restored in a manner that would protect public health, safety, and welfare. So it's my opinion that this site does meet the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment due to criterion D, because of its obsolescence and its dilapidation that leads to detriment to the public welfare, and also criterion H, which is some people call it the smart growth criteria, but says that the designation of a delineated area is consistent with smart growth planning principles adopted to law or regulation. This is in Planning Area 1. The state plan was built by the state through legislation that created the State Planning Commission and the State Planning Act, and this is an area where growth is planned and redevelopment is favored rather than building on green fields. So I believe that this also meets criterion H. Finally, I do want to say that the existing office building is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's active, and the parking lot is fine. But because of the shared access and facilities between these two, namely stormwater management, between the office site and the undeveloped or partially developed remains of the site, that even though the office building technically, in my opinion, would not satisfy the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment, I think that it should be included because of the interconnectivity of these other elements for access and stormwater management utilities. And so I suggest that it should be included for the effective redevelopment of this area if you do designate it, but that it does not satisfy the criteria itself. And that's really the summary of the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan, for that detailed report and walking us through the changes throughout the years. Does Mr. Harrison have any testimony he'd like to give prior to opening up to the board for questions?
Nope.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the board if you have any questions for Mr. Sullivan pertaining to his report.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions. I want to make sure that I accurately heard everything that was stated, certainly in what is a very comprehensive report. Just one question, this was not covered. All the surrounding properties are on city water and city sewer, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason I ask that, and I'm going to go into a couple of environmental concerns, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I do want to affirmatively state and be as clear as possible that as this process continues, presuming that it continues past tonight, there will be heavy scrutiny on environmental concerns, the environmental concerns that exist today, as well as any impacts, positive, negative, or neutral, that may occur. So, this planning board and then ultimately our governing body, our township council, will certainly have that first and foremost in our minds. So just to focus on a few environmental matters, you'd mentioned that for a period of many years, runoff is essentially unmanaged. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. And that the property is not fenced.
Correct.
So, and anyone could go there at any time, really, and potentially nefarious activity or just be wandering around and injure themselves, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a responsibility of the current property owner to manage that better?
I would think so. I'm not familiar with any property maintenance codes in the township.
All right. I mean, obviously we're here to discuss and potentially decide what's going to happen. I guess, I'm troubled that so much time has passed with a property that is potentially not safe for people and certainly is unsafe for the environment. Would you say that in focusing on the portion of the property that is not developed for the office building, that we would have been better off leaving it untouched?
Rather than starting construction?
Then this sort of half,
No question.
Okay. And that is leading, or over time has led to potential challenges in the area.
Yes.
Okay. And just to kind of state the obvious, certainly I think as we proceed, we will be particularly concerned about impacts to residential properties on Adamsville Road, Sunnyside Terrace, Woodside, and to the extent that it expands further beyond that. So, this will certainly be a way for us to hopefully address. This process will be a way for us to address some of the sins of the past, so to speak, that have occurred on that property.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just like to add to what Councilman Kurtz was saying. Let me first clarify. You said that there's some degradation in the building itself on the backside. You at least noticed it, the current building?
No, What I was referring to was the parking area that serves the current building, where
Right.
that meets the undeveloped, partially developed area. There's no curbing along that edge, and the parking lot is actually starting to disintegrate on those edges.
Also, looks like that somebody has developed some stormwater, but it probably did not continue it because you have shown some 3 or 4 pipes that hanging around there, but not doing anything. Is a plan was there for stormwater management, or?
There was a plan. There was an approved plan that included the stormwater management. It's been partially built.
Right. And also, do you know the reason why all the 3 or 4 times nothing has been approved? What is the major reason for not approving the phase 2 and 3?
Well, phase 2 and 3 were approved in 2001. The subsequent use variances were not granted.
Okay.
They were use variances for hotel uses.
Okay, then currently there is a request for warehouse, you said?
That's correct, and that requires a use variance as well.
Oh, okay, but it has not been obviously approved yet.
No, it's pending.
Is there any complaint from the current residents on the, east side, either east or west side? Some of the residents are there.
Woodside Lane?
Yes. Is there any complaint from them because the stormwater management is not managed? Probably the flood water goes to their properties?
No one's complained directly to me, and I didn't have anything in the files that said that, but I did see that in 2015, when there was an application pursued before the board, that there were residents who came and spoke very vigorously about flooding related to the brook, and they wanted that to be protected from flooding.
Okay. No more question. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury. Mr. Sullivan, if I may, perhaps the question would be, 2004, if it was, if Phase 2 began construction, they began to create the pad, do we have any idea why construction was ceased and suddenly in 2005, a request or a potential application for a 4-story hotel and Lot 104 was introduced?
I don't have any information as to the motivations of the developers.
So that original 4-story hotel was supposed to take place on Lot 104 originally, correct? 2 structures on 104.
10, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And roughly 10 years later, then the proposition was 2 hotels on Lot 102, incorporating Lot 104 and 102. Okay. So essentially, we're looking at stormwater management structures that were put in 1981 through 1987.
No, I believe the stormwater structure, well, yes, some of them were earlier, and then the installation related to the Phase 2 was around 2003, 2004.
Okay. How would you say, if at all, how does Building 1 impact positively or adversely the existing stormwater management system that's there in place today? Does it utilize the spillway and the swales that are already in place?
I assume that it does. The existing building.
The existing?
I assume that it does.
Okay. So the existing building functions without issue as far as the stormwater management is concerned?
That's my assumption.
Okay. Would you say, well, another question before I move on. Are there any wells on site, or is this municipal water that's fed to the site?
I believe it's public water.
Public water,
And we did not see any wells on the survey, nor did we see any in the field.
okay. You mentioned about the ground not being properly stabilized. Would you say there's any environmental impact downstream beyond the site in question that would impact potentially the residential neighborhood that's to the southeast or to the west, given the fact that there is no stabilization of the soils? Is some of this runoff, since those swales are not working right, the collection basins, I believe you mentioned?
There's a water quality swale on the northern side, southern side, sorry. But there's also inlets that are not working. The inlet, water's not going to the inlets. Unless you dumped a foot of water on it, then the water, or 6 inches of water, then the water might enter some of those inlets. Not clear that those pipes are all functioning. We saw some of the inlets that were filled with sediment. But there's no stormwater is not controlled the way it was designed on that site, which means that with the installation of impervious coverage, you've got 4 acres of impervious coverage now that is not being managed, and it's going somewhere. So, and it's not being directed exactly where it was supposed to go. So the downstream impacts are, there could be increased runoff. You could have an increased rate of runoff in an event. I'm not an engineer. I don't mean to take Bill's positions on this. But over time, if there is sediment entering any water body over time in a persistent manner, that can build up, and you can actually reduce the flow within that channel, and it could create a higher probability of flooding downstream.
And lastly, if I may, you mentioned it very detailed in your report, but could you, for the purpose of the board and the public, could you mention or shed light as to why the spillway structure and the swales that were put in place way back when, why today they are no longer, they are considered obsolete by New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection?
Well, the current stormwater management regulations require, no net increase in runoff. I mean, generally, and as I said, I'm not an engineer, so I know generally about this, but they also require green infrastructure improvements. And you could think that, the water quality swale that was put in is a form of green infrastructure. It's just not maintained, or, and we're not sure that it was actually built the way it was supposed to be built. We can't tell. But it's changed quite a bit in the last 20 years in terms of what's required for stormwater management.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Any other questions?
Has the property, it doesn't sound like the property's really turned into an attractive nuisance yet. You said there's some evidence that people have traversed the area, but it's not turned into a dirt bike racetrack.
I didn't see any evidence of that.
Okay. Graffiti, vandalism, nothing like that?
The only vandalism that may have happened out there is to these existing stormwater pipes that are just sitting around. It looks like people, broke pieces off, and there was a movable fence that was put out there when there were, from what we gather from the aerials, when the steel was being stored out there, there was a fence put up around it, like a temporary construction fence. That's been sort of half deconstructed, and it's over by Woodside Lane. And some of the weights and ballasts that were used to hold that have been tossed around and things like that.
Okay. Any evidence of it being a dump site? Illegal dumping, construction materials?
Very, very little. There was a little right off the driveway. It wasn't substantial though. It didn't look like somebody came in with a real dump truck.
And in your research, have you come across any comments about construction bonds being issued in the past?
No. Not something we focused on.
Your report was very thorough, very grim reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Magura. Heard a question on this way.
I have a couple of questions. Current building on lot 1.03, would you say that some of the same issues in the other lots are affecting lot 1.03? Is the soil eroding or?
It's hard when you're out in the field to understand exactly where the lot lines stop. As I said, the lot line between 1.03 and 1.02, the driveway comes in, and it really is partially on both lots. The areas where erosion was most prominent was the area where the driveway comes around behind the building, and then where that edge of pavement is touching or abutting the undeveloped or partially developed area. That's where it was obvious.
Other than that, you don't see any erosion of the parking lot, except in that one back area?
Yeah, it's the common driveway. I'm not even sure the common driveway has a top coat on it in terms of paving. I don't know that it's ever had a finished paving coat on it. It looks pretty rough, but it's been there for a while, so I couldn't say conclusively whether it has or not.
And do you know if all the lots were sold at the same time to the same, I know you said they're all owned by the same?
I do not know.
Okay. And I know you made mention of not knowing if we can hold the current owners accountable to keeping it as a safe space, whether it's fencing or anything. Do you know, maybe this is for someone else, how we can find out who can help us figure out if we can hold them accountable?
Perhaps we could check with our administrative offices.
And then, I know you spoke briefly about this, but you talked about creating wetlands currently where they shouldn't be. You talked about water runoff. Is that the biggest impact that could impact the houses that are off Adamsville Road?
Yeah, I think the gravest impact from this is the increased runoff from the impervious coverage that is not being managed.
So if it was prolonged for future years, what are some other scenarios that could happen leaving this land as is?
Well, it's hard to say. You know, I think that you will continue to have, if it's not ameliorated, you will continue to have runoff, and depending on the event, the storm events, could be very bad.
With the current stormwater management systems that are not hooked up or properly, what impact does that have to our current stormwater systems? I know you said there's no knowledge of any contamination. Is there any concern that it could cause contamination?
Well, the only, we didn't note any sources of contaminants on site. The only contamination would really be related to the sedimentation and the sediments that would be carried in that runoff to the surface water. So surface water quality due to sedimentation, and how the water quality would be degraded from that.
Thank you. Those were my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sikora.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments based on things that have come up. I think I can shed some light on at least a couple of these items. First of all, there has been commentary about concerns with flooding along the Cuckles Brook. That has been brought to the administration's attention, and perhaps after I mention my second item, Mr. Pappas can come back to that one. The hotel applications before the zoning board, did those, I think you said, occurred in '07 and in 2014?
One was just gonna get my dates.
And I'm not quizzing you on this,
No, but
but
I
based
wanna
on your answer, I
wanna
can
be
shed some
accurate.
light.
I want to be accurate. 2005 was the first hotel application. And 2014 was the second.
All right, so I remember that 2014 because I was on the zoning board. And just to shed light for those on the dais, those in the audience, the reason why, in a nutshell, the reason why that application was denied in 2014 is because nothing had materially changed since 2005. In fact, there was no change because in the time between 2005 and 2014, there was a thorough master plan review, and it was decided to leave the zoning as it was. There are hotels approved to the east of there. I'm not sure exactly where the line goes. Maybe it's as close as Adamsville Road, but that property was specifically not designated for hotels, and then the zoning board essentially said, "Hey, nothing's changed since 2005." In fact, the governing body has since said, "No, we don't want a hotel here," and that was in a nutshell why the 2014 denial occurred.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, prompted by Councilman Kirsch, but I had been wanting to make this comment. As the councilman said, flooding has been a concern there for many of the residents along Cuckles Brook, downstream. Mr. Burr is here, is very familiar with the extent of the drainage issues there. And I appreciate your pointing out the extensive, incomplete, the extensiveness of the incomplete storm management system, I hadn't realized that it was as extensive as it was, and that as much of that property had been disturbed. And I can't help to think that the way that the area directly behind the existing office building was cleared, and the stone spread, and likely the topography of that area where the building envelope, the building footprint would have been, certainly doesn't improve the management of the stormwater on that site. So I appreciate you highlighting that. This has been an eye-opener for me to now understand the extent of the system that had been designed, that if it had been designed and constructed, maybe that would have improved the drainage issues that are impacting those single-family homes to the east.
We're certainly seeing cause and effect.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Banga.
Very thorough report. Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. Really well done. Just a few questions. What were the conditions of the day when you visited the site, and specifically around some of the comments on stormwater? Just curious, were you there when there was rain, or as the conditions were a little bit wet, so you can kind of determine where the water was running off to, or is it more speculative?
It was dry when I was there. I was able to walk around. It wasn't muddy. Tristan, you were there and it was raining, wasn't it?
Any comments to, I guess, validating the statements here as it's related to the stormwater, like where the pooling was occurring? Because I'm just asking because the conditions of the day were dry, as you mentioned.
Right.
So identifying kind of where the water was going, and in some of the cases, if the inlets were, had sediment into it. I'm just wondering if you can validate some of those statements.
Well, in what we saw out there, so first of all, with respect to the inlets, when you design an inlet, you have the grade elevation, and the grade elevation is where the water comes into it, right? There's no pavement out there. The finished grades were never built. So let's say where we have the existing gravel area where the parking lot was supposed to go, the gravel's here, but the top coat of paving and the base course was never put. So the water's not going to it. I don't need to see water on site to understand that. I mean, the water would have to be flowing probably 3 inches high there to get water to an inlet in most of these places. Walking the site, you get a sense of the topography. You know where the water is going. It's all moving down towards the southeast corner or southwest corner. It's moving towards the brook, right? It's moving towards the back of the property, towards the brook, right? So and there's some soil that's been pushed off when they built that building pad that's there, but there's no. It doesn't mean that the water's stopped. It's not impounded. We didn't see that, but we did see when I explained the cattails, the Typholetifolia, the obligate plant. That's in an area that's much higher than everything else. That's not too far off the parking area. And I didn't even have to look to see that the water was there. You could see that water had been pooling there, but the fact that that plant is growing there is saying that that's got, anaerobic activity in the soil, and it's inundated most of the time, if not all the time. And those were the indicators that we looked at.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. A couple of comments were made regarding the applications that went in front of the zoning board.
Mm-hmm.
I just took a couple of square footages there, but I think in 2005 it was about 161,000 square feet, 255 parking spots, and then in 2014 it was about 150,000 well, 149,853 with 265 parking spots. And then the most recent application being 179,973 in terms of the warehouse. Now, obviously, I think these were denied, I mean, probably for several reasons, but there was concern from the citizens around the stormwater, the impact. I'm just curious to get your perspective in terms of if the board does go ahead with this approval, you know, and not to make the situation worse, let's say. If it's going down, you know, because of the topography to the southeast and it's going into the brook, to your knowledge, I don't think you said that you've heard anything from the residents or maybe there was some validation from Mr. Pappas and Councilman Kirsch in terms of what they've heard, but I don't think I heard from you specifically that you had heard anything that the current water runoff going into the brook is causing any substantial flooding. Is that correct?
I've heard nothing from the residents directly. The only documentation we have of those concerns was during one of those applications where there was a pronounced, I'll say, objection to the development due to concerns about flooding and storm water in the brook watershed and stream corridor.
Okay. And then, so my question is, you know, in your humble opinion, if the board was to approve for reconsideration, what would be like the max coverage? Or potentially, let's say that it, you know, it was rezoned or whatever the case was, and a warehouse was built at the 180,000. Would substantial stormwater measures be able to be taken to be able to control and alleviate some of the concerns that the residents had in both 2006 and 2014?
Well, I wouldn't start with the floor area. I would start with what is the performance or the outcome that you want relative to stormwater on the site and work back from there. I would say, you know, in my mind, you know, I would be trying to cure this site. I would be trying to bring it up to today's standards and to and build in some safeguards against flooding and restoration of areas that may have been disturbed that are in a stream corridor. There are areas like that. I would be focused on that first, and then what can you accommodate after you do that? And how do you do it in a way that meets current standards, both the state, well, state and local are the same now, but to do that, and within the framework of redevelopment, that could actually be enhanced. You know, you could say, well, you know, here's the standards, but we want you to do X in terms of the restoration or the benefits. But I would work backwards from that. I would say, what do you want this site to do, and how do you want it to function from a stormwater standpoint, particularly as it relates to the stream, and then work backwards and say, okay, well, now we can accommodate X square feet of development if we do that. That's the way I would do it.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, and I just want to remind the board that, again, the purpose, just like the last time we were here, the purpose of this evening's hearing is just to determine whether or not this board's going to make a recommendation to the Township Council that this particular study area property should be deemed an area in need of redevelopment. So again, it's really, the focus is on whether or not this property fits any of the statutory criteria set forth that would enable a property to be deemed an area in need of redevelopment. And there'll be opportunities to discuss things like impervious coverage and setbacks and other bulk requirements as a redevelopment plan, if we get that far, as that gets prepared.
Mr. Chairman, I just had one other question for Mr. Sullivan as relates to stormwater management. It's my recollection that the stormwater that travels above ground and maybe even below ground, and Mr. Burr hopefully is listening to either nod or shake his head whether I'm correct or not. I believe the stormwater travels from the opposite side of Route 22 in a southerly or southeasterly direction, and so it's not limited to just the stormwater that ends up off the site on into that brook is not just the stormwater that is generated, if you will, from this site, but it's stormwater that is coming from the north, right, Mr. Burr?
Yes, that is correct.
So I don't know if that was evident to you in any of the materials you had reviewed is, related to those previously held hearings that the zoning board of past had had.
It wasn't something we focused on, but it doesn't surprise me,
Okay, thank you,
based on my knowledge of the topography of the area.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. Any other questions from the board? I'd like to ask our professional if they have any questions regarding the testimony. Mr. Burr, why don't we begin with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any specific questions of Mr. Sullivan, but I may be able to answer some of the other questions that I've heard from some of the board members in terms of drainage impacts downstream of this property. I guess first, let me take a step back to Mr. Pappas's question. This drainage area does extend, the Cucklesbrook extends under Route 22 to the north up to the Bridgewater Middle School. And then it extends up to Foothill Road. So your drainage area really starts in that section of Foothill Road by the middle school and Marywood, and then extends down under Route 22 through this property. We have regular interaction with residents downstream. I would say this property or clusters of property really is the starting point for where we start hearing from residents downstream of these properties. So immediately downstream, adjacent to these properties on Adamsville Road, we have a number of concerned residents. And then it extends in a southeasterly direction. We hear from folks in the Jamestown area. We regularly hear from folks, if you can picture Billion, Klein, and Morton. So there are a number of neighborhoods with people that experience flooding issues, experience erosion issues of the Cucklesbrook, debris that gets lodged on their property that, obviously causes some flooding issues. So there are regular concerns that are brought to our attention. It's something, frankly, that we're constantly taking a look at. We're currently exploring some grant opportunities to see if there's anything that can be done to help improve some of those conditions. So, getting back to the testimony we heard from Mr. Sullivan, I would agree with everything I heard. This property is one, as you've heard, that was developed over the last 3+ decades, 4 decades now, and frankly, the drainage that was installed is obsolete. It doesn't meet today's standards. Worse than that, the drainage that was installed on Lot 102, which is the bottom left property, that drainage install was never complete. As we heard, it's, you have pipes. It doesn't look like they were complete. You have inlets that were not brought to proper grade. I don't think the entire drainage install based on the original approved site plan was installed. And then you never saw the completion of the site improvements, curbing, drainage, et cetera. So it's non-functional. There are no formal stormwater controls on this property as it relates to that partially completed amount of work. There is a swale along the southern property line, but the way the property is graded, it really just allows all the runoff that hits that impervious gravel to sheet in a southeasterly corner. Some of it goes in that water quality swale that really has not been maintained. The rest of it comes to the southeasterly corner of the property where it leaves the property and heads towards Adamsville Road under the culvert of Adamsville. So, it really is, frankly, not a great situation for stormwater. I always look to avoid properties like this that were built decades ago before formal stormwater controls were in place, because the water really is not detained or managed in any way on the site. Runs right off. So this really is a starting point for us. Every time I get a drainage complaint, it's right there, and then we start looking downstream. So I don't know if anybody has any specific questions. That's kind of my 2 cents on the topic, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Burr. Ms. Sikora mentioned earlier, if you were to leave the site alone, and we're talking about the ponding that's taking place and a lot of the vegetation that's growing out of it, does that ponding, if you were to leave it alone in another 10, 20 years, does that ponding increase and could it cause other issues decades from now?
Sure it could. Part of the reason that the ponding is taking place is because the site work was never finished. The property is also not being maintained. So as you have erosion, as you have other issues happening, sediment, other debris is leaving the site, traveling downstream. The changes in the property because of non-maintenance and because the site work was never completed, frankly, it's just going to continue to compound. So I don't think there's any benefit in leaving it the way it is, quite honestly. If there were more formal drainage improvements downstream on the subject property, maybe you can make a different argument, but that's really not the case here. The existing office building that fronts on 22 does have a detention basin in front of that office building that then drains to an inline basin on the right side of the property. Still wouldn't meet today's standards, but it was built and met the standards at that time. So the front portion of the property was completed from a site work perspective. The rear portion was not.
Thank you, Mr. Burr. Does our board have any questions for our engineer?
Mr. Burr, I just had a quick question. So I'm just taking a look at the study area here. I'm just curious, there's like a carve out next to Adamsville Road and then also on Woodlawn. Would this owner be able to utilize that as, it's like too premature, but, as a potential roadway, to Adamsville and Woodlawn?
I would find it hard to believe, based on the current lot configuration, that you could get access out to Adamsville or Woodside based on the current configuration. If other properties were acquired in any future redevelopment, then anything is possible, but the way it's configured currently, not likely.
So just access from Route 22?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banga. Any other questions? Ms. Sarmet?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one kind of addition of information to add to the report. It was lengthy as it is, but just one piece of information, and that was on page 9, which talks about the existing zoning. I just wanted to make it apparent to Mr. Sullivan, or a recommendation to add to the report, that the permitted uses were modified recently in the M1B zone in 2022. And that's just, again, it's just an informational addition to the report and just a recommendation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sarmet. Any other questions? At this time, if any member of the public wishes to ask any questions based on Mr. Sullivan's testimony or any testimony heard thus far, please come forward at this time.
John Arcolio, 1110 Washington Valley Road. Stormwater is a big issue for this site. I mean, Ida just destroyed the basements and ground floors of many houses downstream in Cuckold's and you seem to be the source of the runoff that is occurring. I mean, when you go across 22, you go to the middle school. Worst case, I remember from about 2010 to 12, I mean, if it rained very hard, the track would be okay, but the spectators around the middle school track would just be, squishing in water. So, I mean, that's about, it's not a major problem across 22. So it seems to originate on your property. Is there any reason why the existing property owner is not held liable for not maintaining even 1987 or 1989 stormwater requirements? Why were they allowed to do it? I mean, okay, one down. Looking around, it's at least 80% it's 20% impermeable with parking lot. It's open ground, so this water should absorb. It's not absorbing, it's running off the property. What level of stormwater management, what percent of this property is going to be part of this swampland, which has cattails on it? I mean, that's really a serious thing to build on swampland. I mean, that's something that is being addressed. I mean, I don't see these plans that go from the planning board, but, I mean, you have to meet much more stringent requirements now rather than what,
Yeah, the purpose of tonight's hearing is just to
I'll-
determine whether the property meets
wrap it up.
statutory criteria.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying that, but you're asking about,
I'm getting there,
you
I'm
know,
getting there.
stormwater control and things.
Okay.
The purpose of tonight is just whether or not the property meets any.
Third issue is, you used a word that I just didn't catch to describe why Lot 102 should be included in redevelopment. You had said it out loud, I just didn't, maybe I wasn't listening carefully, but you did use a word to say why you would tie Lot 102 to one of the other properties' redevelopment.
Oh,
Yeah,
which is
I just want to just remember the word you used.
the office building.
Yes, you used why you would extend the redevelopment to 102, which is not really,
Well, it's actually 1.03.
well,
the office
yeah, let's,
So 1.03 is the office building.
Okay.
The office building is an active,
okay.
fine office building with a parking lot and lighting and all the things that go together with that.
Yeah.
It does not, in my opinion, meet the criteria for redevelopment.
Okay.
However, the statute allows for areas within a study area to be included if they don't meet the criteria for a redevelopment area, if they are necessary for the effective redevelopment. And in my opinion, because of the interconnectivity between the on-site vehicular
Okay,
circulation,
interconnectivity, okay, fine, okay.
parking lot, and potentially infrastructure, I think it should be included in the area.
Interconnectivity, is that your criteria, I guess, to, the fourth question is it's redevelopment. So I assume that the developer's going to eventually mention the word pilot. And in this town, education is very important. We don't like pilots for the sake of pilots to take away from the tax base that goes to the school system. And the fire department and any other thing that doesn't get paid out when you get a pilot. So is there pilot being considered at this time? Is that one of the?
Not germane.
Okay,
This is
I'm just
not
letting you
the
know
body
of
that would
concerns
address
of
them. This is
residents.
not the body that would address them.
Okay, I'm just,
But if you ask a question.
jumping
you
the
have to
gun, but,
allow if you ask a question, you have to allow people to answer.
Okay.
You can't just ask a question and then ramble on with more opinion making, so.
all right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arcolio. Any other members of the public? Okay, that closes the public portion for this testimony. Board Attorney, Mr. Peck, I believe at this time we could open it up for board deliberations. And
That's correct. And again, what the board has to determine is whether or not this property, based on the testimony you've heard and the report that was rendered, whether this meets any of the statutory criteria to be declared, to recommend to the council whether or not this should be declared an area in need of redevelopment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peck. Mr. Magora, what are your thoughts?
Well, based on the report, testimony, the photographs, I certainly believe that this project has, well, this property has an opportunity for improvement. It's pretty grim reading, the report, and the photographs, I think, are worth thousands of words. As an aside, this condition that it's in was a result of the actions of, I believe, the developer. And for whatever reason, the project was not completed and he walked away. And for future reference, possibly we could ask for a construction bond to fix the damage done by a developer who does not complete a project. I don't know if it's possible, but I have had some experience in the past with that. But certainly, this property has opportunities for improvement.
That's typically done now, that performance and maintenance bonds
Yeah.
have to be issued, but, I don't know what the case was back in 1987 or.
Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Mr. Wang?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thank you for the thorough report and investigation. This is really pity that this land has been idled for years. Has not been utilized. Because of that, I think the stock management is not in good shape. And I hope that, of course, I see this satisfy the criterion D and criterion H. So that's what I hope, that this land is going to be, managed to make the neighbors happy, to make, fully utilized. Thank you.
Ms. Sikora.
I'm a little concerned on the ability to hold the current owners accountable to upkeeping the space, because regardless of if we recommend this space is an area in need of redevelopment, I do feel for the homeowners behind, or most closely in conjunction with lot 1.02. I'm interested to see if we can split off 1.03 from an area in need of redevelopment, as I believe that lot doesn't meet the conditions for an area of redevelopment, but I believe that I am for the other lots.
Mr. Banga.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, no, I think the report that Mr. Sullivan had done a phenomenal job on this. Just in general, based on the conditions that we've heard today, and especially some of the concerns from the residents, regarding existing conditions, I would support consideration in this case to make the, as Mr. Sullivan mentioned, working backwards in terms of what we would want to achieve in terms of stormwater management here. Yeah, I think we can do a little bit better here, and then, see what we can retrofit within, these lots. Thanks.
Mr. Pappas.
I appreciate the thoroughness of Mr. Sullivan's report. I can only reiterate what has been said here. The conditions of the property, the previous owners that had obtained approvals that did not complete the approved site plans have brought us to these conditions. The other challenge that we have, the township has, is that without there being, Mr. Peck can correct me if I'm wrong, or Mr. Burkhan, but without there being any new site plan, it's virtually impossible to dictate the completion of any stormwater management system that may have been designed for this site. And that's a major concern that we have. So I do believe that his report has identified the necessary criterion and would support this resolution to the council.
Mr. Atkins.
I'd like to echo Ms. Sikora's sentiments about holding the property owners accountable for the dilapidation of the property. And I'd like to thank Mr. Sullivan for his detailed report. It seems to me that it meets criterion D, and I would support looking into this property.
Mr. Chowdhury.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So again, echoing the reports are excellent report. I mean, it's a great engineering report, even though you may not be the engineers. If the site development improves substantially, and the stormwater management and also the flooding situation of the residents, yeah, I think we should recommend to the council for reconsiderations. Hopefully, at least, I also like what Ms. Sikora and Mr. Atkins says. I think we should at least find responsible for the current owner to maintain some of the things that it is all deteriorating. I think that should be at least, one of the requests to them, or however the township want to impose it. Thank you.
Councilman Kirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stated earlier that this was a very thorough report. Certainly takes into account all the relevant facts and commentary about the property, its history, its condition. Certainly this is a case where, in Bridgewater, sometimes you learn something new every day. I obviously knew that this property was adjacent to the Cuckles Brook, but didn't really put one and one together. That the partial clearing, or really the clearing and then the partial development of this is making a bad situation worse. I guess my view is that presuming that we continue down this pathway, that will hopefully be a way of fixing the environmental challenges of the past. In the event that we do not redevelop this property, I think that the township does need to seriously consider going back to this property owner and identifying every possible recourse that we have for fixes, so that whether or not this property is developed, the environmental conditions will be improved. So that's my feeling. But I do accept the report as written, and will vote to recommend that we proceed to the next stage of the process.
Ms. Chartowitz.
Thank you to Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Harrison for the very thorough report. I did drive the site, both sides, and I did note a lot of the same conditions that you reported. I even noticed that on Woodside Lane that there was a little path that people had just walked through into the parking lot. So whether there was evidence of vandalism or whatever, it's just, like you said, it's an open site, so people can come and go as they please. I would say that due to the dilapidation that's stated and evidence in the low maintenance of the property, and it's over 20 acres that's there, that by improving that stormwater management and designating this as a redevelopment area, it would also improve our tax roll if we could get this up to be whatever we could get it to be. And I also am in agreement with Ms. Sikora regarding Lot 103. I'm not fully in support of that lot because it did seem to be up and running, and I think, I saw people coming and going to the medical offices as well. So, but overall, because they're all together and they've been conveyed together in, I think in 2022, that they would be considered all together. So I would be in support of this as well.
Okay, I think that just leaves me. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for the very thorough report, as well as the public commentary. Not having been familiar with this site or not having seen any of these plans throughout the years, it's surprising that it's deteriorated to this extent. I can only imagine what the effect downstream has been throughout all these years. And supported by some of the public testimony that we heard also this evening, it's clear based on your report that it meets a criteria D, essentially delineating some deterioration, dilapidation, obsolescence of the stormwater management, but also to a lesser extent criterion H. We talk about smart growth planning. We have Route 22, major arteries nearby, shopping centers, so there's also a smart growth planning element to it as well. So we didn't touch upon that much, but I do, however, believe that Lot 103, I was wondering as well whether or not that should be included in the site, but I did ask Mr. Sullivan a question whether or not it was tied into the existing stormwater system, and it is. It seems to rely heavily on that sort of stormwater management system, so I think I would probably leave it as the entire site. But other than that, without echoing the rest of the testimony that we've, or the other comments that we heard up here this evening, I would also be in favor to send this to the council for designation as an area in need of redevelopment. So with that, Mr. Peck, we'd have to open this up for approval. And what would the condition be?
There is no condition. What the board's deciding is whether or not to make a recommendation to the council, whether or not this should be an area, deemed an area in need of redevelopment. So we would need a motion to either make that recommendation or to not make that recommendation.
Mr. Peck, just a quick question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. So I think there's some conversation, at least from the board members, that 103 is a question mark. I don't know if
That could be a motion too.
that needs to be a motion itself, or if everybody was unanimous to declare the entire site. But just I wasn't clear on who said it should be, who said it shouldn't be. Should it be a consideration before we present this back to the council?
That could be a motion as well, to deem all the lots except 1.03 as an area in need of redevelopment. Mr. Sullivan did indicate that that site was necessary, I guess, for the functioning of the stormwater infrastructure and whatnot on the entire site. Said standing alone, it wouldn't qualify, but it's integral to the other lot.
Just a question for either Mr. Peck or Mr. Sullivan or anyone else who has expertise here. Presume that we do designate the full area. Just because an area has been deemed in need of redevelopment, there may not be even one shovelful of dirt changed on that portion of the lot, correct?
That's correct. My recommendation is really based on the interconnected nature of it with respect to vehicular access and shared parking areas and facilities. Mr. Burrs indicated something that I wasn't really thinking about, was that the stormwater management's on a separate lot. It's on like 1.02, not on 1.03. So there's an integration or interconnectedness with stormwater management as well too. Should the rear of this property, lot 1.04, be redeveloped, and that includes stormwater management, there may be modifications necessary that impact and go upstream to that office building. So if it's not in a redevelopment area and there are issues related to zoning or access or things that you were trying to solve, it may make it a little stickier to deal with.
Would we have to restart the process again, or redo certain portions of the process?
I'm not saying that you would have to go back and designate it again. You could, but if there are logistical coordination between access or stormwater or other elements that we don't even know yet, because we don't know how this site may be redeveloped, we just wanted, in my mind, because of those relationships, it could be included even if you're not envisioning wholesale redevelopment of that particular property.
And ultimately, as this process continues, and we're now seeing this on other properties in Bridgewater, whether it be this body, whether it be the township council, through a transparent process with input from the public, at a later time, if the will is to say that spot is not, that area of the property is not going to be considered for other uses, there is certainly still that opportunity to do it, correct?
Right. When you develop the plan for this, you will dictate where and what and how much and how big and how everything's going to be built here. It's like a mini master plan, a mini plan development. And there's no obligation to add any use or buildings to that property just because it's included.
That portion of the property.
That portion of the study area.
But it does leave the door open to the extent that there could be questions about access to the property, drainage and things like that. It leaves the door open.
Yes.
And in your mind, is that generally a best practice in a case like this?
When we're looking at these, we really look at the location of things. And I think as a planner, you don't want to cut off your options before you have considered your options. You want the largest possible area with which you may want to expand a driveway or put in stormwater management elements or tie into something. So I think it's a very good practice to do that. And particularly in this case, specific to this case, I think it would be a good practice or a good move to do so. That's why I included it in the report.
Mr. Sullivan, just to ask you, address that in a different way, if this lot with that's developed was excluded, do you think that would be a mistake?
I think it would limit the options for how you deal with these elements that will be shared between that property as it exists now and whatever happens on the partially developed lot.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Board Attorney, Mr. Peck, with enough discussion being placed around Lot 103, we should probably have a motion that includes Lot 103 as part of the designation as an area in need of redevelopment.
Well, a board member can make whatever motion they choose to make. And based on Mr. Sullivan's testimony, it would be, all just to declare the whole study area an area in need of redevelopment. But if somebody wished to make an alternate motion, that's certainly their right. It would have to be seconded. Once seconded, then it would have to be voted upon.
Mr. Chairman, may I make maybe a slightly different suggestion on how to reach the same conclusion? Do you want to just ask the will of the board whether they are comfortable including or excluding, just so you'll have a sense of where the support is?
I think that would suffice.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, I'll start off by saying that, given this conversation and the necessary flexibility that we may look for later, I'm in favor of including 1.03, the entire area that has been under consideration by Mr. Sullivan.
Okay. I'll start on this side. Mr. Pappas.
I think we need to include the entire property, including Lot 1.03, for the reasons that Mr. Sullivan stated.
Mr. Wang.
I think the entire, we include 103.
Mr. Magura.
Yes, I concur that it should be included.
Mr. Cora.
I'm back and forth. I agree with what Mr. Sullivan has stated. It's just, I have a hard time wrapping my head around the recommendation for that one lot. However, when looking at stormwater management, being able, I understand the issues that could arise with changing what needs to change in all lots, that I would be in favor of all. I'd be more in favor of removing 1.03.
Ms. Chartowitz.
I think given the discussion and the fact that 1.03 has a direct impact on the other lots, that I would be inclined to include it.
Mr. Banga.
Yeah, I think echoing the sentiments here, I think the concern is more around stormwater. I think the access is definitely there if you take a look at the right side. So it's less about the access. I think you talked about interconnectivity, which I do agree to an extent. But I think when Lot 104 was being redeveloped, the road kind of did carry through. So I'm back and forth as well. I think I would be support for 103 as well, just based on the conversation that we've had so far.
Mr. Atkins.
I'm back and forth as well, if you can't tell. If the question is about accessibility from Lot 103 to 104, say there are two different owners of 103 and 104, would the owner of 103 not be required to provide access to 104? Maybe a question for Mr. Peck.
If 1.03 were part of the redevelopment plan, then that would all be integrated. If, for whatever reason, 1.03 were cut out, and you could still have a redevelopment, you'd have to, unless they could get an easement over 1.03, I think they'd have to make alternate plans.
Okay. I'd lean towards supporting it.
Mr. Chowdhury.
Well, it looks like that we are all in the same boat here today. We are not extremely sure that whether it is a redevelopment or not, but at least, giving that testimony, I'm on the same boat that, if we don't develop 1 or 3 together, then accessibility may be a problem. If we do develop it, at least we are sure that there will be some accessibility. In that thin line, I'm with everybody. Let's at least do 4 recommendations for all, including 1 or 3.
I agree, Mr. Chowdhury, and I also made my thoughts known in my previous deliberative statement. That being said, Board Attorney Mr. Peck, I believe we have our straw poll here has been conducted. Essentially, we would need a motion then to recommend that the full site,
The study area.
the study
Yeah.
area be recommended to council, designated as an area in need of redevelopment.
Correct.
And that being said, who would like to make that motion?
I'll motion.
Is that Ms. Charters-Witz?
Ms. Chartowich.
And I'll need a second.
I'll second that.
That's Mr. Banga. Ms. Probst, could I have a roll call, please? Yes.
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 Is that me? Yes, that's all right.
Yes.
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 Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. Once again, thank you very much for your detailed report and walking us through the changes throughout the years. Thank you. Okay, moving along this evening, our application portion for the evening. There will be only one application this evening, as Haas Julia has requested adjournment to December 3rd. We do have Chick-fil-A here, however, on Block 164, Lot 6.05, commonly known as 754 Route 202. And who will be representing the application this evening?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Michael Silbert from the law firm DeFrancesco Bateman, located in Warren Township. And I have the privilege and honor this evening of representing Chick-fil-A, Inc. So, it's the first time in my career I've ever sent out notices and got phone calls of people calling me with excitement for a development application. So that's certainly a first for me. Before I introduce the application, I just want to confirm that notice is adequate. It's sufficient that the board has jurisdiction to hear this matter with Mr. Peck, if that's possible.
Yeah, I didn't see any problems with what was provided.
Thank you.
Appropriate to proceed.
Okay. So the applicant this evening is Chick-fil-A, Inc. The property is Block 164, Lot 6.05, more commonly known as 754 Route 202. The applicant is seeking preliminary and final site plan approval with bulk variance relief. Property is located in the M1 zone. Just a little background information. The property, it consists of 54.3 acres. It's a shopping center with multiple pads. It was part of an original development that consisted of 84.3 acres and is being treated in accordance with the original tract size, and that's all in accordance with the township's requirements. One thing I would say is that, to my knowledge, this is one of the only properties in Bridgewater that permits drive-throughs as of right. So Chick-fil-A is proposing to construct approximately a 5,000 square foot Chick-fil-A restaurant with a drive-through on the commercial pad in the location of the former Ruby Tuesdays restaurant. That restaurant's been vacant since approximately 2018. It's a full demolition and construction of a new building. I'm not going to provide too much of an introduction here. I'll just go through some of the variances that are being requested. As I had mentioned, there are some variances. So we are requesting a front yard setback variance for parking, where 100 feet is required and where 19.3 feet is proposed. I believe this is was a variance that was previously granted. However, because the building is coming down, we're seeking it again. And our engineer can address if that number is changed in any way due to the canopy. We're also seeking a side yard setback with respect to parking. Again, 100 feet is required, whereas 48.9 feet is proposed. Again, that variance was previously granted, but again, new building here. We're seeking variance relief for the proposed signage. Wall signs are limited to 5% of the building facade or 100 square feet, whichever is less. We're proposing 3 wall signs, and we're seeking 153.5 square feet amongst the 3 signs. We're also not providing a off-street loading and unloading area. That's required pursuant to 126-341.40. And we're requesting some variance relief with respect to landscaping for the number of trees. So I'm taking a little different approach this evening to the application, given the joint review memo that we received from the board's planner and engineer. A lot of operational questions. So, Mr. Chairman, if it would be okay with you, I'd like to actually call as our first witness, John Martinez. He's the Senior Development Manager for Chick-fil-A. Then we would move on to our engineer, Jeff Martell, followed by, he'll address obviously the site plan. He can answer questions on the architectural plans and elevations you see, and then followed by Patrick Downey, our professional traffic expert. And then to conclude, I have Matt Flynn from McDonough Planning Associates here to provide the planning testimony. So I don't see the exhibit up, but we can introduce the exhibit when you come up there. So
We could have them all sworn in as well, actually.
Yeah. Why don't, do you want to do that now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
And then when, after we, affirm or swear, then just in order, state and spell your names for the records. So, right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give in accordance with this hearing will be the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay, starting with the fella in the back with the red tie. Sure. As long as you can be heard.
John Martinez, M-A-R-T-I-N-E-Z.
Jeffrey Martell, M-A-R-T-E-L-L.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Silbert.
Thank you. And just a couple of things I thought the board should be made aware of just when they are considering this application. There is a pending application in Hillsborough for a Chick-fil-A. That's at the zoning board. I have nothing to do with it, and just making the board aware that there is another Chick-fil-A that will hopefully be opening in the relative close proximity to this location. The other thing that I just wanted to mention, our engineer will certainly speak to it, is that there's cross parking availability. So while the restaurant is proposed to be on the pad, employees and patrons have the ability to park elsewhere on the site. It's not secluded to the pad. The other thing I just wanted to address briefly, the fire review memo dated September 11th, 2024, which we received October 10th, 2024. To address some of the points raised in the memo, I actually had the opportunity to meet with Xavier Alvarado. He's the assistant fire inspector and assisted Mr. Scalera in preparing the report. I met with him in person on October 11th. And one of the things I asked for clarification on was his review letter suggested that the Green Knoll fire truck had to traverse around the drive-through lane, and that would not be possible based on what we're proposing. What Mr. Alvarado was able to clarify was that the fire truck just needs to have access into the commercial pad. It doesn't need to have the ability to circulate around it. And so as much as the people on the ladder truck there might want to stop for Chick-fil-A while they're in the truck, they're not going to be able to do that. So that's been clarified. So I just wanted to say that I think we're able to work through a number of the concerns or issues raised in the fire review letter. Most of the comments in the joint review member require testimony. The comments that don't require testimony, the applicant can comply with all of them. Mr. Peck, I can list them if you want now, or we can.
If you want to list, yeah, well, What are there more of? What-
Pretty much everything that says no testimony is not needed. If it just asks for a plan revision or applicant shall comply with this, we can comply with it. So there's no,
Just identify which
Yeah,
comment
okay,
it is
sure.
that the testimony is going to.
okay. And let's see if there's anything else. I think that's it. I think I'm able to call my first witness, Mr. Chairman, with your permission. Again, actually, she's already been sworn, so I did want to bring up a couple of the exhibits and have them up for the board for their review. So if we can have the colorized site plan aerial. Oh, it's up there, okay.
Yeah, and it's on the.
Okay, so we're not doing, computer's fine, right?
Yeah, the computer's fine. That works for everybody. We do have paper exhibits as well, but computer works for everybody. So Jeffrey Martell, I'm just going to state with two exhibits in the record for
Thank you.
Mr. Martinez's testimony. Mark Exhibit A1, what's on the screen now, which is entitled "A Site Plan Rendering Prepared by Stonefield Engineering." It is, in terms of its content, it's identical to the site plan sheet within the set. However, it has been enhanced with an aerial image and colorized with the landscaping for the purpose of the presentation this evening. Exhibit A2 is what's entitled "A Grand Opening Plan," and it's prepared by Stonefield Engineering. It has a date of 10/15/2024. Mr. Martinez will describe it in a few moments, but those are the two exhibits that we used for the first witness's testimony.
Thank you. And Mr. Martinez, if you would be so kind, can you just introduce yourself to your board and explain your relationship with Chick-fil-A?
I can. Assume everyone can hear me. Again, John Martinez. I'm a development manager with Chick-fil-A. I've been in this role for about 10 years, but I've been associated with Chick-fil-A since about 2001. Been involved with most of the new store development here in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, Virginia, Maryland. In my role as development manager, I'm responsible for not finding the locations, but once a location is identified, developing the plan, putting the team together, making sure we comply with both shopping center requirements or property owner requirements, as well as municipal requirements, including DOT requirements. And so in my looking at this site, that's what I've done. I'll kind of take a little step back, kind of tell you a little bit about Chick-fil-A. So it's a privately held company. We have about 3,000 restaurants throughout the country. In fact, we just opened our 3,000th one earlier this year. All the sites we develop are chosen by Chick-fil-A, so we don't have preferred developers. We find our own sites. We either purchase them or lease them. The Cathy family owns Chick-fil-A. And with that, once we do decide on a site, we construct it, we do then end up having a franchisee or an operator come on board. So we partner with an operator. But unlike a typical franchisee relationship that may have a territory or multiple locations, if you're chosen to be a Chick-fil-A operator, you get one store. That's it. That's the one location. Now, if you've proven yourself over many years, you may have an opportunity to get a second store, but it's not a guarantee. The vast majority of Chick-fil-A's are operated by one individual. That individual is not decided here in Bridgewater. We get probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 60,000 people a year that apply to Chick-fil-A to become operators. And of that, we only choose about less than 100. This year, we'll open 145 locations. And so we're pretty selective on who we find. And there's a reason for that is really our success. It's because we're finding an individual that is very motivated from a business perspective to drive the business. But more than that, is really interested in building a team, building in the community. So the operators typically have a connection to the store location, whether they live there currently or they grew up there. That's what we're looking at. Quite often we'll see, especially in like New Jersey, we're relatively new here in New Jersey. We only have maybe 40, 45 stores. And so a lot of Chick-fil-A operators that may have been raised in Jersey have left, they actually come back to their hometown to operate the store. So it's pretty exciting to be involved with that. The store itself is, as Michael indicated, it's just under 5,000 square feet. It's 4,989. It's a one-story building. We'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of up to 90 seats or so, 92 seats on the property. Probably about 20 of them would be maybe for outdoor seating, but the rest would be inside. The store itself is really what I would call the latest and greatest that we're doing. So there was a significant change at Chick-fil-A during COVID. As we all experienced, COVID was a challenge, and it was a challenge for us, but in a different way. Our business, quite honestly, exploded during COVID. We were able to stay open through our drive-through, and it really introduced the brand to a lot of folks. And while that's great for business, it certainly was a challenge from handling cars' perspective. I'm sure you've all seen YouTube videos of cars lined out the streets. But one of the things we realized right away during COVID is we were testing something called dual lane fulfillment. And the locations that we had it in parts of the country, mainly in Texas, where we had that operating during COVID, it was remarkable how we handled the traffic. So essentially, and we have it on this plan, as you'll see, there's 2 full lanes going around the entire building. Unlike some other competitors, even what Chick-fil-A used to do prior to COVID, we used to merge the 2 lanes into one and go to a pickup window. Well, we no longer merge those lanes. So the obvious question is, hey, well, that's great for the inside lane that gets to the window, but what do you do on the outside lane? So essentially, Chick-fil-A has taken out the drive-through window, the typical window that you see at other locations, and we replaced it with a door. A bifold door, similar to you'd see at a pharmacy or supermarket. And so we walk the food out to both lanes. And what that does, that gives us the ability to not only provide food quicker, but it also allows us to provide better, what we feel, better customer service to our customers that are in the drive-through lane. Drive-through business is about 50% of our sales, so it's an important factor to us. It's not the only thing that we do, but it's an important thing. So we definitely want to make sure that we give good customer service to the folks that are in the cars visiting us through the drive-through. This design is relatively new, but it's not uncommon here in New Jersey. So since COVID, this is what our designs have been. In fact, Bridgewater originally wasn't this design. We actually modified it in our planning to incorporate it. But we've opened this in locations that are extremely high trafficked. So in my mind, I grew up here in New Jersey. My mind, probably Route 17 in Paramus is probably one of the most busiest roads that we have in New Jersey. So we recently opened a store, the old Fireplace, if you're familiar with it. It's in a jug handle on Route 17 with an access point off of 17. And to the best of my knowledge, there has not been any traffic backup onto 17 because of the store. And it's because of this dual lane fulfillment. Is really a significant improvement to that. Additional to that, one of the other things you'll notice is the building's fairly large at 5,000 square feet. A lot of this building is kitchen. So the other thing we learned is we need to have a kitchen that can support sales. So this building will have enough fryers and all that equipment, the technical equipment to supply that. Chick-fil-A is open 6:30 in the morning. Yes, we do sell chicken for breakfast. Not a big seller in the Northeast, but it's really filling, it's really good. And we close 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Saturday. We'll be closed Sundays here, and that's a company policy. We have deliveries. We do get deliveries every day, pretty much of fresh baked bread, of vegetables. But that comes in a small box truck. We do get tractor-trailer deliveries that come approximately 4 times a week, but they come at night when we're closed. So after hours, we have a key drop type facility where the drivers will gain access to the building after all of our team members have left, and they will put that product inside. The store itself has somewhere in the neighborhood of between 80 and 100 employees, or team members, as we call them.
I'm sorry, how many, 80?
Between 80 and 100 total employment, yeah. So it's a very heavily labored operation. So unlike some of our competitors that are probably adding more and more equipment and robots, we actually add more people. Not all those people are full-time, of course. It's up to the operator who they choose, but we find that typically about half the people are full-time and half are part-time. On any given shift, the maximum we would expect would be about 25 people. But operators are very flexible with their team members on the hours they work. And so that's where we would look. The site here, our leased area is about 1.2 acres, and that has about 45 or so parking spaces, 44, 40. It's actually 44 parking spaces, but technically how New Jersey calculates parking now with the EV, we have 45 spaces. We also have cross parking with the shopping center. So the expectation is all of our team members will be parking off of our pad, freeing up quite a bit of that space for our customers. One of the concerns that is raised by other boards is, how do you handle that pent-up demand, that initial grand opening? So Chick-fil-A has a process in place where when we are ready to open a store, we actually bring in team members from elsewhere, from the other 3,000 stores across the country. So it's a really good opportunity for someone that lives in, you name it, Iowa, to get a chance to travel, paid by Chick-fil-A, to come to a store here in New Jersey, in the New York market, and to help train staff. So that's a real important part of Chick-fil-A. We'll bring in probably 20, 30 folks, have them here for the first couple of weeks, and it really serves two main purposes. One is it helps train the new team members on Chick-fil-A service, the My Pleasure, all those types of things, how to do it. And it also helps manage the customer demand, the pent-up demand. So that's something that it's really important to Chick-fil-A to do. The other thing that we do is we work with the local police, and the expectation is we'll work with your local police to have some off-duty officers also be ready there on site to help, I'll say, not necessarily control the traffic, but certainly keep the peace, keep people calm while they're getting on site. To do that, we'll also have a grand opening traffic control plan that will develop with your town. As we go through this process, we'll share it with your engineer, your traffic engineer, and certainly your police to develop a method of handling that traffic. So what we found, and this is based on my personal experience for probably opening 200 to 300 Chick-fil-A's, is that when we have that grand opening, it's a perfect storm of new employees not necessarily knowing what they're doing, customers that don't necessarily know how to get around, and a lot of demand. And so we'll kind of come up with what we call is like kind of the worst case scenario for how to handle drive-through traffic. Because essentially that's usually what is the attention getter, is the drive-through backup. So we'll work with the town and have a plan that will essentially kind of take away some of our on-site parking spaces, convert that to drive-through stacking, and we'll be able to stack quite a few cars. So my traffic engineer will talk more about the specifics, but essentially our dedicated drive-through lane can handle 29 vehicles. So there can be 29 customer cars in our drive-through lane without affecting our parking lot at all. When that 30th and 31st car comes, there's room for them on site, but in this grand opening plan, we're going to actually allow them to stack another 10 cars by taking out some parking spaces. So we'll get to about 39 cars on site without really causing any effect. We have the ability to even increase that further, and during grand opening, we will probably actually do that as well. And we can get to somewhere in the neighborhood of upper 50s of cars parking on our site without affecting one drive aisle in the shopping center. Customers would be then directed, if they don't want to go and wait in that line, they would be directed to park in the parking lot, the shopping center parking lot. As you'll see on the site plan, there's sidewalks that we're proposing that aren't there today that will allow customers and team members to access other parts of the parking lot to come to the Chick-fil-A. Again, I want to assure you that that pent-up demand is something that occurs initially, a couple of weeks, and it really dies off. And as that traffic starts to get managed by our team members, get more experienced, customers know what they're doing, we will then reintroduce parking on our site as we go through. My expectation is that as time goes on, we won't even need that traffic control plan anymore, but it will be on site. So if something happens, a special event happens or something, that operator will be able to pull the trigger and implement that as we move forward. A few other items I just wanted to touch base on. We also are showing canopies on this site. So there are two canopies that are shown on the site. One is over the meal ordering area, and the other is over the meal fulfillment area. These canopies have a height limitation of 9 feet, so it has a clearance bar, 9 foot can go through there. So it can take most vehicles. And these canopies are essentially there to allow our team members to be outside delivering food and taking orders in all types of weather, whether it's raining. Honestly, really the biggest issue is sun, heat for them. There's an area of shade, and that allows then all-weather, the ability for all-weather order taking. So you may have seen some of our Chick-fil-A's team members are outside with iPads. We'd expect that here as well, to take that order, as well as delivering the food, they can deliver that outside. So those canopies are an important part of providing good working environment for our team members. Other things, we do have trash dumpsters on site, both a trash dumpster and a recycling dumpster. They get picked up, well, they'll get picked up as needed. We typically start with every other day for trash, but if the store is that busy, we can certainly move that to everyday pickup. There's for those that are interested, there's an 8-yard container inside this trash enclosure, so it's a fairly large enclosure. We also recycle other products besides cardboard, specifically oil gets recycled. We actually have to keep that inside of our store. We use a DARPro system. So think of your home hot water heater, an 80-gallon hot water heater. That's essentially what the DARPro system is. Believe it or not, that actually gets stolen if we kept it outside because it's a valuable product. So we actually sell that back to a recycler. And I mentioned the deliveries already. So I think I've hit a lot of the operational questions, Michael.
Great job. So most of my questions for you were answered there. And if you didn't already mention it, what are the typical peak hours for Chick-fil-A?
Great question. So we measure, basically, there's 5 times that we measure. So we have 5 parts of the day. So we have morning. I can tell you that's extremely slow. You'll have more traffic probably at a closed store than you will at Chick-fil-A. But our lunchtime is fairly busy. Since COVID, there's actually a new day part. It's actually the time between when lunch stops and dinner starts. The afternoon is actually a fairly large time for us. And then dinner time. Here, in Bridgewater, we would expect that dinner would probably be a fairly busy time. But generally, our peak is Saturday at lunch. So Saturday at lunchtime from about 11 to 1, 2 in the afternoon is the busiest historically for Chick-fil-A.
Thank you. And we spoke about it today. I'm bringing it up simply because it was in the report. Can you talk a little bit about curbside pickup and mobile ordering? I know we had spoken about it, but it's in the report, so I just want to address it.
So Chick-fil-A has, we equip our operators with multiple ways of serving customers. And what I mean by that is they can serve them at a counter inside the store. There's dining in. We allow takeout. We have a drive-through. We have areas where you can have curbside pickup. So we give a lot of potential options. We have mobile. We have an app so customers can order on their phone and go pick it up. We also can participate with third parties, your DoorDashes, your Uber Eats. However, we encourage new operators not to turn on all those channels at the same time because it overwhelms their staff, it overwhelms everybody. So they gradually bring on those channels as they get more and more experienced. So I want to assure you that Chick-fil-A has the ability to control how we deliver and we sell our product. And it's more important for us to have a good experience for our customers than just to turn it on and just sell everything all at once. It doesn't do us good. So things such as curbside pickup are actually kind of almost going to the wayside. We have the ability to do that, but it's not actually the most common. So typically on something like that, curbside pickup, what you previously saw as a curbside pickup, with geofencing, and if you don't know what that is, it's essentially the way you track someone's cell phone. We have the ability to determine when that individual comes onto our property and where they park. I mean, you can get down to literally within like this parking spot. And so if we wanted to, we could bring the food out to them, but typically we still have them actually just park and come in and pick that up. So things like curbside pickup in all those numbered spaces are kind of starting to go away from Chick-fil-A. We do still use that in some locations, but we're not going to necessarily designate a whole bunch of spaces with those kinds of signs.
Thank you. And just preface my question. So would you agree that a lot of fast food operations or drive-through operations, if they have what I'll refer to as a queuing mitigation plan, they implement it on an as-needed basis? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
But you're saying no matter what, you're coming into the site here and you're going to have a plan put in place, whether the pent-up demand is there for grand opening or not. You're going to have a plan in place no matter what.
That's correct. So essentially what we've learned is, we go to using we go to DEFCON 5 at first, and then we back that down. So we'll do that for a minimum, at least the first week, to understand what people's patterns are, and then we'll start to back down that mitigation. And I say this to you just to give you a level of confidence that Chick-fil-A is here to manage that. I know Michael mentioned that we're looking at other locations like a Hillsborough, but even more importantly, what Chick-fil-A does is we don't necessarily just build a store and then leave it and walk away. We'll go back and invest heavily and reinvest in our stores. So the first store, for example, that I did here at Freestander in New Jersey was in Hamilton Marketplace. It was a very prototypical back in the day how you did a drive-through restaurant. We actually have just closed that restaurant and built another one behind it in that same shopping center and opened it up with a lot of the same technology. Trust me, we hadn't even, we hadn't even written off the investment on that. That's important. You may be familiar with probably the closest store here is Flemington. I would imagine that's the closest one. And again, that was built with almost none of what I talked about on the technology side. But we're actually just got approved from Flemington, and we're going to be closing that store, and I think we may have already even closed it, actually, to go there and implement a lot of what I just talked about, these dual lanes. So Chick-fil-A is going back and implementing that where we can, where we physically have room to do that. Whether that involves leasing more space, it's really important to us to provide that good customer service. So I definitely want to impress upon you that Chick-fil-A is here to be a good neighbor in Bridgewater. We've been looking for a long time to be in here. I can tell you for sure. It's been many years. Even before I was in this role 10 years ago, we were looking in Bridgewater. So we're excited to be here, and we definitely do not want to wear out our welcome in Bridgewater.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, and I would turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, and the board for any questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martinez, for that background. Any questions from our board members? Ms. Martinez?
I have a question.
Ms. Chartowitz?
Most of the time when we frequent Chick-fil-A, you see on the highways a sign that says, okay, this exit Chick-fil-A. I'm assuming that because this is about like 6 miles off of the highway, there won't be a sign on 287 or whatever advertising that there's a Chick-fil-A in this location. Is that accurate?
That's more than likely accurate, yeah. So those highway wayfinding signs, there's a group at the DOTs that handle that, and we have actually folks that handle it for Chick-fil-A. They're on a first-come, first-served basis, and it's literally based on who's ever closest to the exit gets on there. At 6 miles, I would not anticipate that being the case.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Chowdhury?
Okay, first of all, way you are explaining it, actually, even though I don't eat chicken, probably you are tempting to me to eat chicken. So, yeah, a few of the questions for this may not be exactly related, but you said that you will have a 44 parking spot?
And within our leased area, there's 44 spaces.
Okay, then,
And then we have cross-access to the rest of the shopping center for additional parking.
and how many, assuming that you are not discarding the curbside pickup, how many generally, in general, how many you block for a curbside pickup parking spot? Do you reserve any curbside pickup parking spot?
We typically don't necessarily reserve that for that. We have in the past.
Right.
But we don't necessarily serve for specific, for parking cars and walking food out. That's if I'm
Yeah.
answering the question.
So you don't have a reserve?
But this site is set up that it could be done.
Right.
But if we were to do that, it would be very, very few would be that way. More than likely, customers that have mobile order or ordered in advance will walk in to pick up the food.
Okay, as probably you have seen, by the way, it is very close to my home, so I know that place very, very well. So Wegmans generally have lots of traffic during the Thanksgiving time. I mean, you cannot even pick a parking spot even up to the furniture store there. So have you planned on giving that situation, having planned on a Thanksgiving, how you're going to handle the Thanksgiving traffic, especially on the Friday, Saturday, Sundays, because that way you probably have a maximum flood of the people there as well as cars. Have you thought about Thanksgiving and probably in Mother's Day and Thanksgiving? Those 2 days will be a tremendous traffic even for Wegmans.
Sure. So what I will say is I can easily answer one of your points. So we're closed on Sunday. So that part of the week, half the weekend, we're closed.
Okay.
And that's not going to change as long as the current ownership owns that. But what we would find out is when there's a known event, like a Black Friday, for example, we may proactively then just block off some more parking spaces and anticipate some more drive-through. It also really comes down to what the operator finds is their biggest sales channel. So when COVID first ended and dining rooms opened back up, dining room usage was very little. In fact, Chick-fil-A started to actually take seats out of our stores. But what we're finding as time goes on, a lot of it goes back to the same, except for one thing, which I'll get to in a minute. And so that dining is right now is about 15% of our business, people that dine in. Pre-COVID, it was about 20% of our business. Drive-through is actually going back down to about 50% of our business. That stayed the same. The thing that's changed the most is the mobile ordering. And the folks that either mobile order, come and pick it up, or that use DoorDash. So that was kind of surprising how much DoorDash gets used. Again, it would be something that wouldn't necessarily be day one, but it would be eventually used here as well. And so those individuals, they would park in the stall, walk in, pick up their food, and leave right away.
There's also some hygienic questions here. Oil. Pardon? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Oils recycling. How many, basically, what's the frequency of the oil recycling? I'm asking you for a more like a hygienic point of view.
Sure. So the oil gets picked up as needed, but typically that's about every month or so. Okay. We'll have to get that oil recycled, emptied.
Those are basically, obviously, you will follow all the township procedures and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually a very clean, simple process because we actually put a nozzle connector on the side of our building, and the truck that comes to pick it up connects to it, siphons it out. And what was happening? It's a DARPro have a specific nozzle. Some criminals got that nozzle and were visiting locations in the middle of the night, in a rental U-Haul truck and just stealing it. So.
Okay, on the safety side, when your team members basically walk around, for taking the iPad or delivering the food, especially on the dual lane. How do you actually, do you have any sort of that record for accidents, or at least preventing the accidents for cars? Not only on the abusing, also people do abuse, verbal or anything else. So how do you control that one, especially on the safety side? Team members walking around the both lanes.
Great question. That was a big challenge that Chick-fil-A had, even trying to roll this out. So that when we were testing it, we worked through a lot of different methods for safety. So beyond the bollards and the striped areas that team members walk, I think it's important to realize that when cars are in the drive-through going through there, they're essentially going almost zero, right? There's no speed with these cars. So they are trained on how to stay in their lanes. Cars, the bollards there protect the cars from going into these striped areas. My knowledge is I'm not aware of any major issues. I have heard that some team members have gotten their toes run over, but has not been any kind of safety issue there. And I want to assure you that what we're proposing here is being done in hundreds, probably by this point, thousands of locations throughout the country. If you want to see them, you can see them here in New Jersey. I'm trying to think. So the closest one that we do is, I know we did open one in Edison recently that has it. There's a lot of locations that have it.
I will go and look at it now. Okay, we'll obviously discuss about variants later on, 100 feet by 19 feet versus 100 by 89 and all those things. On the trees, number of trees, now if you look at the Ruby Tuesday, by the way, do you know, Mr. Michael, what is the square feet of Ruby Tuesday was?
I'm checking the plan here.
Yeah, I can tell it's larger than Chick-fil-A. It's probably about 6,000 square feet. So we're small. Our building is smaller than Ruby Tuesdays.
Okay, that means you are not disturbing any trees, right? Do you have to disturb any trees there?
Our perimeter curb is very the same, but you ask a great question, and the reports have a question about like the shade trees out front. So it's kind of interesting because Ruby Tuesday's lot is really the only lot that doesn't have any of the trees, while the rest of those trees are there. So we've kind of inquired as to, we're not opposed to trees. We don't necessarily, feel either way. But the shopping center doesn't want those trees there. And the shopping center doesn't want those trees specifically because of the sign. So the main sign is set back from the roadway a little bit.
Right.
And it's not a very tall sign. I would use the term as a glorified monument sign that has, Wegmans and.
Yeah, I know.
Chick-fil-A is not even on that sign. Right? We're not going on that sign. We don't have a freestanding sign. The only signs we have are on our building. That's one of the reasons why we're asking for a variance there. That's the only signs we have.
So you will not have a town center sign, Chick-fil-A on a town center sign where the Wegman and all the stores are there.
Yeah, we're just going to be on the building. Yeah.
Okay.
That's part of it.
Thank you.
Obviously, our engineer can address the trees, but we do have an exhibit from our planner that I can pass out to the board that'll demonstrate from an aerial perspective why we think there probably weren't trees at the existing pad here when Ruby Tuesdays was there. So.
Okay.
I mean, so I just kind of want to put that out. I mean, it's not like we're saying, hey, we don't want trees. We have landscaping. Landscaping is super important to us. It's something that I think the shopping center owner doesn't necessarily.
And
I'll not hold it back. I could just pass it out now. So.
How long?
Say three.
How long your shift is again? How many hours the per shift is?
I'm sorry?
How many hours?
What would you call this?
Per shift?
We're going to call it just by its title, Planning Exhibits for Chick-fil-A, Inc. Planning exhibit? Yes. They're drone photos taken today. They're 4 pages. Pass that out. Thank you.
You said you have 80 to 100 employees per stores, but obviously 25 per shift. So how many hours per shift? How many hours in a shift?
It depends. Okay. So again, it's really up to the operator and the mix. But generally speaking, you'll have about half the team members will be full time.
Okay.
So they may work an 8 or a 10-hour shift.
Okay.
But the other half are either retirees or school, younger folks that maybe you can only put an hour or 2 or 3 in at a time.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm done.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm,
Mr. Banga, please.
Mr. Martinez, just a general question. What was the primary reason for this being the site that you selected?
The other sites we looked at in Bridgewater had zoning challenges, specifically not a permitted use. And this location became available. And we've been negotiating with the property owner ever since. So that is a one reason. Secondly, honestly, we've been very interested in we prefer to be in a shopping center with a Wegmans, with a Home Depot, with those type of uses. So this really checks a lot of the boxes that Chick-fil-A would like. So we're excited to be here for sure.
Great, thank you. And then just regards to, I guess, over parking, and I'm just taking a look at, the current, I see, I guess it's Town Center Road, so, and then you make a right, and then another right to get into Chick-fil-A. In the case that, let's say the parking lot is completely full, it looks like there's a walkway right across the street that would kind of go into the furniture store. Is that accurate? And then how would, potential pedestrian, I guess, make their way through, or I guess, is that an expectation of yours that they would be able to do that? So I guess I'm looking at where it says like 7, 11, 7.
Yeah.
It's toward the north side on the east.
That's correct. So you've described it generally correct in your description of it. That connection doesn't exist today. So we're proposing to add that sidewalk connection, the crossing that access drive, and provide a path, concrete walkway, onto the sidewalk that's against Chick-fil-A, that both team members and customers can get to our front door. Based on some grades and meeting ADA requirements, we don't want those folks necessarily crossing the drive-through at an undesignated location. So we're purposely having that sidewalk connection come up and having them cross where we feel is a controlled location.
Oh, so they would be crossing, going west, and then past the dumpsters, I guess, and then come back around. Is that kind of how I'm navigating that?
It's slightly circuitous, and I'm going to let my civil engineer kind of go into more detail because I don't want to step on his.
Sure.
But I can tell you that we make sure that it meets all the requirements from ADA, and that does. Plus, again, we're cautious as to where folks potentially cross or don't cross our drive-through lane. We want that location to be very well designated, and we feel it's the safest location to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Mr. Martinez, you mentioned that Sundays are closed, correct? Is there any store activity on Sunday at all? Any deliveries or any store personnel on site?
Oh, great, excellent question. So one of the main reasons we close on Sundays is so that it allows us to actually maintain our store. So while we will not cook chicken or sell chicken on that day, you may see some folks there doing maintenance on the equipment, changing filters. I've always asked, how do companies that stay open 24/7 actually maintain their equipment and change filters? Well, the answer is they don't. But at Chick-fil-A, we make sure that we change those filters and maintain it. It's not an every Sunday occurrence, but occasionally you'll see someone in there doing some maintenance. The only time operators are allowed to open on a Sunday is, and we've done it occasionally. Unfortunately, it's usually when there's a negative event occurs, where we're gonna take care of the community. So if there's a fire in an apartment complex or something, our operators will come in, cook chicken. The only requirement is they're not allowed to sell it. They have to give it away. So it's truly a giving back to the community for that. That's the only time we would do it, and that's not something that we plan on doing. It's just something that if it happens.
Excellent. And as far as the oil storage that's on site, that's common practice for some franchises, or is that specific to Chick-fil-A, the way that you store the oil?
That DARPro system, I mean, it's available to everybody, but I think we're one of the main users of that system.
Is there like fire suppression that's isolated to that storage system?
Our buildings are typically sprinklered, so we would be, so it's not treated like a hood that would have a separate Ansel system.
Right.
It would just have the regular sprinkler system protection.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Very thorough report, so that's why I don't have many. You mentioned there are going to be 80 to 100 employees on like a Saturday where it seems to be your peak time. How many of them are going to likely be on site?
So the expectation is that we would have about 25 folks on site at that point.
Okay.
Now, I said we will have more folks in that initial period for sure, because we're going to overstaff this, significantly overstaff it, just to make sure we've got proper training. But on any given Saturday after that, the expectation is probably about 25.
Okay. And when you talk about parking on site, are any of those spots likely to be taken by employees, or are the employees, are they going to park maybe elsewhere on the campus? What's the anticipation there?
That's exactly, the anticipation is that the team members would park off of our leased area in the area directly behind us. And we were putting a sidewalk to make access there convenient. I can't say that an employee would never, maybe if they're running late, sneak in, but absolutely the expectation is to leave the parking lot free for customer traffic. And our studies have shown, and our traffic engineer can get into it, that overall, if we were a self-contained lot, we would look for somewhere in the upper 50s to around 60 parking spaces. Here with 45, 44 on our leased area, and having the ability to park behind us, the 25 team members, that is more than comfortable for us overall for parking.
Okay.
If I could just add to that, we looked at this and viewed it as a commercial pad. Everyone on the board is very familiar with the property, so the board's aware there's over 2,700 spaces on the property. But under the township's ordinance for restaurant uses, we do meet the township's parking requirements based upon the number of seats being provided. Chick-fil-A provides more parking typically than what the township's ordinance requires.
And you are churning cars fairly quickly because a relatively low percentage of your people are dining in.
That's correct.
So between the drive-through and the quick run-in and pick up or the DoorDash, those spots are likely not being used for more than a few minutes apiece.
That's what we found. That's correct.
Okay. I don't want to jump ahead, especially because I think it's going to happen on a different night. You do have a traffic engineer that's going to be coming on, right?
Correct.
Okay, because I think that one of the areas that I know I have concern, I'm sure others on the dais, maybe some who are in the audience, and I'm not talking about when you first open. I mean, steady state. Presumably, you're going to, if approved and if you open, this would be a pretty successful location. I'll be particularly interested, not how you're getting people onto the site. I'm going to be particularly interested in how you're getting people off the site. That's maybe just a preview of at least where I'm looking. As you proceed with the hearing.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions?
I have, I guess it's a comment, and Mr. Martinez, you probably would likely, Mr. Silbert will say, well, that question should go for your engineer or your traffic engineer, but I'll mention it here because you're probably a decision maker. Board members will hear me say, I find that in most commercial operations, the number of handicap parking spaces are connected with some formula that's required, but it's been my observation that more and more individuals have that parking decal, and that the number of spaces will fill up relatively quickly and making it inconvenient for those that need that. So I would ask that you look at whatever the number is, that you look to increase that. Thank you.
We'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puppas. Any other questions from our board?
Mr. Chair, just a couple questions, if I may. Quite honestly, I think Bridgewater would be blessed to see a Chick-fil-A come to town. But, you know, they say it's harder to open a Chick-fil-A than it is to get into Harvard. And I think that's just an incredible thing. But you mentioned electric vehicle charging. How many spots would there be, and is that required by state law or federal law?
Yeah, so I can answer part of that question. So New Jersey does require it, so it's a state law. They actually don't require necessarily car charging to be there day one. They require it to be made ready, and then they require it to be phased in over a couple of years. That's not how we operate. We're going to put it in there day one. So we will install car charging day one. If your question, madam, and I'm going beyond your question because there's multiple levels of car charging if you're an electric individual. We will install level 2 charging, which is kind of the middle of the road charging is what the expectation is.
Okay. How long do you estimate it'll take for just one car to go through the drive-through to order, to wait, and then receive their food?
Our traffic engineer can get into specifics, but generally speaking, from the time you place your order to the time you get your food is about 4 minutes or so.
And how many cars do you expect to, be in the drive-through at any given time?
Oh, that's a great question. It really varies. Certainly in the mornings, it's very few. It's going to get busy on Saturday afternoons. So let's say we know that. I don't have an idea. All I know is that we're equipping our folks with the ability to handle a lot of cars through there. And so that's our expectation. Our traffic engineer can get into some counts, and we'll get really specific with that.
Okay. And you mentioned a sign. Where exactly would that sign be? And would the lights be turned off at night?
So you mean building sign?
Building sign?
We're actually proposing 3 signs on our building. One facing the Highway 202 and one on either side. It's very similar to what the other tenants along there have done. There's no separate ground-mounted sign for Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
There is also actually a 4th sign that I don't know if your consultants actually found it or saw it or not. We actually put a nice it's kind of a welcome to Bridgewater sign literally on our building. It's not visible from the street, but it's technically visible. But to answer your question, yeah, our signs are turned off at night. Typically, right after we close for business, we turn the signs off. We have to, because if not, people keep coming. That's literally, we have to turn the signs off. The parking lot lighting is typically also removed, except for some security lighting. Here, being at the entrance to a major shopping center, we will keep some lights on because we want to make sure that the rest of the center is active. But we will turn our signs off right when we close.
All right, thank you. You all provided some very detailed and thorough reports. They answered a lot of my questions, so I do have to thank you for that. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Any other comments? How about from our professionals? Mr. Burr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions, John. You mentioned the meal ordering will be handled at the drive-through lines in person by real people. Is that?
Yeah,
they'll have iPads and they'll be taking orders in person.
Sure. So the facility is set up with the ability to do both. Have team members out there with iPads taking orders, or what we would call a static menu board, like what you see at a typical menu board. So static menu boards are installed, operational, and would probably be used for breakfast. To be completely transparent, it's just not enough customers out there. But as soon as lunch picks up, more often than not, those static machines, boarding boards are turned off, and folks are out there with iPads typically the rest of the day.
Okay, you answered my question. So it's going to be both.
Both, yeah.
The typical menu boards as well as in person.
That's correct.
Okay. You had mentioned and we talked a little bit about the cross-access, the parking across, I guess it's the Raymore and Flanagan parking lot, if I'm not mistaken, just across the drive aisle. Do you have those rights in writing? Are they already secured for the cross-access, or is that something that's being negotiated with?
We have that as part of the lease. We basically have cross-access and cross-parking through the entire center.
Okay.
So I can provide that information to our attorney if the board wants to see that. But yes, we already have that in place.
Okay, very good. You mentioned deliveries. I guess there's two vehicles for deliveries, a small box truck, which will be daily, and then a larger tractor trailer, I think you said 4 times a week?
That's typically 4 times a week, correct.
Do you envision that tractor trailer coming into the pad site and navigating around the new building, or is it going to park on that access driveway just beyond the new restaurant? Is that where?
Yeah, it's going to actually do what typically our expectation is, in our direction would be, is for them to back in just to the start of our parking lot in that main drive aisle, and then turn off their engines. So it's the truck engine and the box, the refrigerator engine. And then from there, they would deliver the food into the facility via hand trucks.
Okay. Hence the importance then of that operation taking place after hours. And will it be after hours of the other uses within the complex as well?
So typically, the trucks come between midnight and 5 a.m.
Okay.
So I don't know the specific hours of all the uses there, but the ones next to us are closed.
Okay.
And you can imagine, the reason for that is very functional. So back when I first started with Chick-fil-A, we used to have our deliveries during the day. So you can imagine all the busyness of Chick-fil-A and having a large truck come, it was not good. And so having Key Drop is a much better facility. For the board's benefit, that's a huge expense for us, right? To pay people to work at night is not an inexpensive thing, but it's such a better customer experience that we pay a large premium to have that occur at night.
You had discussed the queue management rather extensively and how you guys keep an eye on that. When this, assuming this is approved and this facility is opened, is the ongoing oversight of how the drive-through line queuing functions, is that going to be the responsibility of Chick-fil-A corporate, or will that eventually fall under the individual operator of that site? Like, who's going to hold the bag here if this thing starts stacking out into the main driveway for this heavily used facility?
So with our agreement, the operator is responsible for running that. Okay, so the daily implementing that is 100% that operator. That operator is going to have, you're going to know who that operator is once they're determined. They're going to have the connection with the police. They're going to be your daily contact. So if and when there's an issue, something's not being done, that operator is going to be the individual that you're going to be working with. Corporately, we still hold the lease, and we're still on the hook ultimately. If the operator fails to live up to that, we would get involved, and we would put pressure on an operator. If that operator just completely was negligent, we would take over that responsibility, but that's something that we would not expect to do, because in that vetting process of operators, you know, we make sure they're going to understand that they have a responsibility for Truett Cathy's good name to make sure that the facility is run appropriately.
Last question has to do with landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
We talked very briefly, we have the exhibit here. Understand the likely reason why there's no landscaping along the frontage, especially with the entrance to the complex, the monument sign. In your opinion, is there an opportunity here to add some low-level, some shrubbery along the frontage of the parking spaces?
Absolutely.
Maybe to break up the view of the front of the vehicles?
Not
be
even a
something you would consider?
We will propose it. I'll have to get that, and I'll take care of getting that through the landlord, but absolutely, we have no issue with that at all.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burr. Sarman.
Thank you. In relation to Bill's second to last question, relating to that queuing where you mentioned you'd kind of have to take over if there was any kind of terrible situation. Has that ever happened before in any New Jersey sites?
As far as us taking over, not that I'm aware of, no.
Have there been other sites that have had queuing issues or problems with kind of neighboring uses or neighboring buildings where there were issues?
Plenty.
And it never came to the takeover?
No, it never came, and it typically wasn't the operator issue. Typically, when we have some impacts to either roadways or other businesses, it's more related to the design of the site, and typically it's an older site. So I'm trying to think of the most egregious one in New Jersey that I'm aware of was probably in Union, New Jersey on Route 22. If you're familiar with that, I mean, that site is in the center island. And so the issue was really just the amount of cars and our effect on, there was 2 other tenants on that site, a 7-Eleven and a
PETA something?
PETA Shack. And so that went to court and all. And ultimately, the solution at Chick-fil-A is what we ended up taking over the entire property. And so now we're going to go back in and try to adjust that. But New Jersey DOT has very specific requirements on where those driveways are, just because of the complexity of the roadway network there. So we are working with that. And I think it demonstrates Chick-fil-A's ability to go and say, look, we're going to spend a lot of money to try and take care of something that technically maybe we could keep on operating, but that's not the right way to do it. Additionally, what you probably don't know is that even during that situation, we tried to put another facility on 22 to take some pressure off of that. So I spent quite a few months in a zoning board meetings in the town of Springfield, New Jersey, and on a 4-acre site to put a Chick-fil-A, only a Chick-fil-A on a 4-acre site, and we got denied. And I say that not to feel sorry for us, but I say that for the board's benefit, to say that we're trying to do what we can, where we can.
Thank you. And as far as, I know you've given some testimony about the operations, about how this site has been designed for a specific kind of operational evolution as Chick-fil-A goes through the motions of that. How often do sites' operations change? So once it's built, once it's constructed, it's designed for a certain kind of operational manual at the time. How often does operations change from a corporate level down to, or is it all site specific?
No, I think what we do is we're constantly innovating. So we're always looking at what we've done and trying to say, okay, hey, that's great. Now let's see what we can do to make it better as we move forward. And some of those improvements, if they're significant enough that they make, we try and go back and retrofit. So to speak specifically here, like the idea of dual lane fulfillment is important enough for Chick-fil-A that we're spending a lot of money going back and trying to retrofit a lot of locations with it. So not only Flemington, we're trying to do the same thing in South Plainfield. We're going to try and retrofit that. There's a different challenge because there's a large gas line that goes through there. But so I would say we're constantly innovating, and it just depends on what the innovation is to whether we go back and put it in that facility or we just use it as a next one moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming that the dual lane, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the dual lane queuing really has to do with making sure that cars continue to move and that orders get fulfilled. It's not limited to just a single drive-through window.
Well, that's correct. You actually take the window out with this. And so you're able to process a significant more number of cars. So the same number of cars come to our site, they just don't stack up like they used to.
Sorry, I meant like a prototypical drive-through. I meant the single drive-through window is like a normal drive-through that everyone's used to, is that they start to bottleneck there.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Back to the question that Bill had raised about having cross-access agreement, and I know you'd mentioned before that your employees basically would not park on this pad site, they'd park elsewhere. Do you have kind of like a max number of employees, part-time, full-time, operations managers, whatever, that are on site at a given time? Like what's what's the max number of employees that you'll see at the peak part of the day?
So what I would say to that is that decision is actually made by the operator because they're paying all those folks. Other than grand opening, so putting grand opening to the side, our experience has been somewhere in the neighborhood of around 25 folks in that Saturday peak period. Not to say that there couldn't be 28 or there might be 20, but 25 is probably a number that I would feel comfortable where we're at.
Okay, I only asked that question to try to assess kind of the impact it has on the overall site development, not just this site that's, part of the application tonight, but the overall site that it could impact. And then, so would you say because kind of the parking pressure is no longer includes employees, that the parking that's being provided is adequate to handle the customer base, basically everyone, the visitors to the site?
Yeah, absolutely. With the 44 spaces, we're very comfortable that would more than handle our customer need.
Okay, and I think you mentioned earlier that the drive-through accounts for about 50%. So then the other 50% would obviously be, walk-ins or mobile orders. Is there curbside delivery?
Yeah, so essentially, the real rough breakdown as stores go is somewhere around 50% drive-through, 15% or so dine-in. Then the other 35% are a combination of folks that mobile order, come pick it up and leave. DoorDash could be anywhere from 10 to 15% here I'll say in the suburbs.
Oh, like a DoorDash driver will come pick up multiple orders or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I pass a comment, or it is not our timing?
Quickly, if you don't mind, sure.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking when, Ms. Catherine was basically asking about the car traffic jam or something. Since you are so-called a technology-driven company, have you thought about using AI to basically use the AI to make sure that at least you know beforehand what people will be likely will be ordering it, make ready, and then make the cars go fast, at least all the line go faster?
So I don't know if I would use the term AI, but to answer your question, yeah, some predictive ordering and food preparation, we absolutely do that. So we kind of find out what the pattern is in the community, right, and understand and account for it. So there's communities that have Tuesday nights are extremely busy. Well, why? But we know every Tuesday night you're going to have a certain order, or there's certain product that gets sold. Okay. And when we come out with our vegan chicken, we're going to have a whole new folks.
Land use meetings are on Tuesday nights.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury, because I'd like to give the public an opportunity to respond. But before I do that, Mr. Silber, I'm just acknowledging the hour. And I'm looking at our calendar here. And forgive me, are there any dates? I think November. Nancy, no, right? December 3rd, I think we find you back here.
Here anyway on December 3rd. Let me just check with my team. Make sure. Okay.
Yeah. I'm good. I can make it.
Okay, yeah. We'll certainly take the 3rd.
The 3rd, okay. Thank you. And again, if I could just open it up to the public now, to anybody that wishes to ask any question or comment based on Mr. Martinez's testimony, please feel free to come over now.
Good evening. Is this the time for appeal or registering an appeal, or is this just comment right now?
At this time, it's just to ask questions of the witness of his testimony.
Okay.
When all the testimony's concluded, then you can make general comments and statements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, that closes the public portion for this witness. Mr. Silbert, unless we have anybody that's going to give a 30-second or 5-minute testimony, I think maybe it's a good place to Pause, yeah.
Quick, we're not that quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good.
We'll return back on the 3rd and continue on with our presentation. We'll start off with our civil engineer, and we'll go through the site plan.
Very good. And thank you very much. Have a good evening. We'll see you on December 3rd.
Just there was an item on the agenda before this, the Hula House application, which was, I believe, either adjourned. I don't know if it was officially adjourned, but I did provide notice for that hearing, and I just wanted to make sure that it's on the record this evening that it's being carried or adjourned to December 3rd, so that I do not have to renotice.
Yeah, you don't need to renotice. It's been on, and we've advised that it's been carried to December 3rd, and no further notice
Thank you very much.
will be given.
And just so we have it on the record, no further notice will be given that we are carrying this to December 3rd as well.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Probst, as we said, we do not have any business in November, correct? In November, correct? Okay. So we will meet here on December 3rd. I believe we have now 2 applicants that evening? Well, 3.
Jeez. Your mail delivered here, dude.
Busy, huh?
Wear a nice tie that night. Wear the good one.
That's right. Okay, there's no other business on the agenda for this evening. Any general comments from the board?
Quick clarification, no planning board meeting in November.
Correct.
Application.
Correct.
Got it. Got it.
Any other comments? With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
That's Ms. Sikora, and I'll need a second.
I'll second.
Ms. Chartowitz, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Have a good night.